Testing, testing. All right, there we go. That should work. Now the sound should be working. Yeah, it'd be better to join Discord because I can't watch all the different typing things. So Discord is easier for me because I can hear voices of everybody instead of having to type and read. Yep, I can hear you. Who is this? Can you hear me? I can hear you. Cool. Special ops pack, really? This game had like a 80 gigabyte download thing. It still requires more download stuff. Like, wow. Is the original here? Still loading.
Raven Saber 2, officers down outside the Tanto building. Officers down.
Bloody hell! What is the status on the hostages?
Yeah, you can ask anything. I don't care.
You all done?
Yes, sir.
Captain Price,
Sergeant Garrick.
you with me?
Hey Tomas, how's it going?
Let's go. Check those corners.
We need help up
Hostages up top.
Up here! Help! Help! Someone! Someone, please! Get it off me! Please, get it off me!
Charlie, I need you over here.
Help me! Help me, I'm not one of them!
All stations, we have a man with a bomb strapped to him. Keep your distance.
Look open! I want to see my family. I want to see. Can you help? I'm trying. Let me see my girl.
It's going north.
I can't get it. No time! Help me! Help me! Wait! What are you doing? No! No!
All stations, bomb is clear. Prep medical, we're coming out. Okay, everybody stay calm. We're gonna get you out of here. You broken?
I'm good.
Anybody in the voice chat yet? Some people in there. Nobody's talking though. Cool. Tomas, did I get the chance to be a co-host on the ACA? I got invited on. They said first we're going to set something up on the Truth Wanted. So I think I'm scheduled to be on there in March, and then after that, they said maybe for the ACA.
Why have we got our hands tied? Just take the bloody gloves off and fight. Sir. Cool. We don't stand a chance in hell with these rules of engagement, Captain. They can tell us where, they can tell us when. Don't tell us how. My men were tracking that cell for weeks.
You had actual intel on this?
Quite a bit, sir.
I get it. You're with me.
Freyboy J, has anybody ever had a conversation, ever reached back out to you and said, you know, that one point you made, I disagreed with, looked into it, and I changed my mind, and I agree with you? It's happened a few times. Like they've actually mentioned it in the conversation where I have to go look at it more, and then they looked at it and found out, yeah, I was actually right about that. So it's, yeah, that happens pretty often.
This is classified.
يلا ولا ضاني جهزوا لي هالكم
48 hours ago, terrorists stole a shipment of Russian gas.
Only Al-Qatala would do this.
The Russians make no distinction between Al-Qatala and your people.
And I make no distinction between Al-Qatala and the Russian army. They're both terrorists. We would never use these poisons.
And help us track it before they...
Before they what? Take it to Europe? Or America? We live like this every day.
Commander, it's time to go. Who is this?
Alex, this is my brother and Lieutenant, Hadir.
You are CIA?
He works with Captain Price.
Then you kill Russians, yes?
I have friends who can help us. But your sister decides what's next.
Of course. My sister is in command. And the Russian army is still here.
This occupation must end. That we can all agree on, yes?
No.
General Barkov's men control the city. We have plans to change that.
We have no missiles, but we have our ways.
If you stay, we can help you. But if you stay, you fight.
Yelling out to him.
Marhaba Ali Urzikstan, Alex.
Follow me.
Yeah, remember another episode of Fighting for Philosophy. That's right. Kill the dirty Russians.
These tunnels are our lifeline. We have intel Russian troop commanders are in town today. We're going to ambush them.
How?
Explosives.
That'll get their attention.
And pull security away from the Russian base, leaving it open to an attack.
We must hold nothing back.
Too far on that path, and we lose ourselves. Get set for the airbase attack.
Be safe. Alex, take these charges. C4 with remote detonator.
Thanks.
Watch my sister. Good luck.
You too.
Have I recovered from Wotan's idiotic ear bashing? Wotan was hilarious. Wotan was great. He got me a lot of views there. It was very fun, entertaining, debating with Wotan.
Come on up, Alex.
Sheen, what was the end point on the discussion with the Indian expert on consciousness? Does some form of consciousness from the microtubules survive death? No. That was never, I don't think that was ever a point of his model. So in the microtubule model, the Orc-Or interpretation of consciousness, it's all physical. It's just a physical product of vibrations in the proteins. And so there's no afterlife. He actually said that in the very beginnings, like, yeah, this has nothing to do with a god or anything.
How do I look?
It'll do. Tarek, what's the report?
Russians are just outside. If they see your weapons, they will shoot.
That happens. Our plan fails before it starts.
Alex, our guns give us away.
Observations are not evidence. Also, you can see it's fake. Yeah, just look at it. Right? You just gotta look at it. You can tell the world's flat just by looking at it. But observations aren't evidence.
No guns in the street, Alex. Gun away, Alex.
Follow me. Barkov's forces occupy the entire city. They separate that men and women. They will be very strict. Their officers are coming.
Will Barkov show up?
Almost never. He hides while others do his dirty work.
What do you think it is with flat earthers that gets them so incensed with globers? I think it's a religious thing. I think the reason they believe so fervently is because of their conviction to religious belief, and so belief in God kind of gives them that, or credibility that the globe is flat, I think. I don't think they're like actually lying or deliberately trying to mislead people.
What kind of dirty work?
Are ultimatums moral, amoral, or immoral? Just the ultimatum on its own, as long as it isn't enforced, is just amoral. It's just a statement. Like,
Get through that main door.
That's
I'll find
close
you on the
enough.
outside.
oops.
While others do his dirty work.
What kind of dirty work?
Punishment.
But I would say that if ultimatums are enforced, then they become immoral.
This is where we split up. You'll need to comply to blend in. Get through that main door. I'll find you on the other side. Go on. Follow the men.
In spite of my generosity and protection, there are forces that must extend
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. I have no idea what my IQ actually is.
them safety and bring them peace and prosperity.
I'm through.
Go left. Down the alley. See that soldier?
Table Space Invaders.
Yeah.
Approach him. Slowly. Get his attention.
ну стой!
Take him.
Yell all you want. No one is coming.
Keep your weapons.
كريم ديري بالك أخالك إكتي. You're resourceful. Good.
Keep your weapon hidden. Let's go.
Tomas, can you explain how your
I
own
have contact
world
points just ahead. That has
in
more
your
explosives.
morality argument is not empty of other people? Well, you can choose to allow other people in, so it would initially be empty of anyone else. Everyone gets their own world, and you can do whatever you want with it, set your own rules. But that would include, like, inviting other people to come into your world.
Can't go loud. Need a
So
suppressor.
Find an oil
you
filter.
could always
Silence your weapon.
allow people into your world, or people could allow you into their world.
Civilian camp.
And you could create joint worlds with people if you wanted to, democratic worlds. So you wouldn't necessarily be alone in the world. You could have anything you wanted to, essentially. I'm playing on PS4. I don't know if it's a Pro or not. I don't remember. In what century will religion die? I'm guessing probably not for a while. I think there's always going to be a small minority of religious that always exist. But it's dropping pretty quickly.
Check the garage.
Get back to work!
A little bit. The graphics have changed.
That'll do it.
Good. Head back and flank right. Go around the truck. Right side.
Взять кого-то живым. На фронт. Рабочая сила.
You get two. I'll
Бав
take the rest.
прислугу, мужиков на каторгу. Как он говорит, в хозяйстве все сгодится. Я подошел! Какого черта?
Hey, how's it going? Hey, Jack, this is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the newest one.
Move in. Hold up. Stay away from the door.
Осторожно, могут быть растяжки.
Do you have a shot?
Oh, a dog got me. Wow. Jewel, yes. Immoral actions are sometimes justified in a non-perfect world, but justified doesn't mean moral. They're still immoral. They're just sometimes
Clear.
less immoral than the consequence of not doing them, which makes them justified.
Hold up. Stay away from the door.
Осторожно, могут быть растяжки.
Do you have a shot?
Yep. Clear.
This way.
Yeah, the dog got
Sorry
me.
about
I
your
didn't even
contacts.
see a dog.
We have the explosives. Your sacrifice will not be in vain. Hide the gun. We're going back outside.
They couldn't be justified in immoral actions could never be justified in a perfect world because you wouldn't ever be forced to do a worse immoral action. You'd always have the option to do the non-immoral action, the immoral or moral thing.
What is this? Please, she's just scared. Stand down. I know what you do. Do you understand why we do this? They hang because they killed our soldiers.
The game is Modern Warfare, Call of Duty Modern Warfare.
Let's get moving.
We can live peacefully, but only if we help each other.
This is a goddamn war crime.
There is a terrorist
Punishment
who caused
for
this
the
pain
stolen
for
gas.
all of us.
I play on PS4,
What can we do?
not really PC. I don't want to.
Accomplish our mission.
I don't like
And
loading
end
stuff on my
Barkov's cruelty
PC.
forever. Barkov is sending in helicopters. You take them
Yeah, no
out.
problem.
Forces from the base will come
Happy to
running.
answer.
Giving us a window to attack.
Hey, how's it going?
Send explosives on the helicopter.
Sure. Yeah, I think therefore I am. Yes, that is where I start.
For you. Guards get in your way, take them out. Quietly. Meet back here when you're through.
What was your question? Was that your question?
Guards on the entry.
If you engage, try not to be seen. Guards get in your way, take them out. Quietly. Meet back here when you're through.
I think you skipped a step there. So the first thing is that I think therefore I am, and there's some difference between my imagination and reality, because we know there's some things that I think that aren't a part of. There's some difference between the imagination and reality. If I imagine a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn, so we need some way to differentiate between the two. And then coming up with a methodology of which method is how we determine. That's why we use the cup analogy. Well, since we can always explain anything past or present that we see, like if we see a cup falling over, we can always explain that in lots of infinitely different ways. But if we look into the future, and the one that can say, if my explanation is correct, I can make this prediction about the future that we don't know yet, that one is the better one. That methodology of looking into the future is what gives us a good reason to think that that explanation is the superior explanation. Hey.
Guards on the entry.
If you engage, try not to be seen.
Two down.
Alex, are you on the roof near the helicopter? Nice.
Still looking for a way up. I'm at the target.
You know what to do.
We can make an example of those who refuse to follow my orders. Enemies are your friends and family. These conspirators among us
Alex, set your explosives.
carrying out unspeakable acts against our people
Charge set. This will make one hell of a distraction.
and support
That's the plan.
the United
Now get to the other helicopter.
and their partners in this case. Anyone who collaborates with these groups will be sentenced to death. Today, the people of Uzbekistan are far better off under my command.
Well, yeah, there's infinitely many hypotheses you could come up with that could always make the same predictions, but whichever one is first is the best because it was the one that moved us forward. So you could always like come up with different explanations and say the reason that there are fossils in the ground, or I could say that I predict that if there was an evil demon, he would have put fossils in the ground. Therefore, we can look and we can see, yep, there are these fossils in the ground. And that would be evidence of the evil demon if it was the first time we ever predicted that. If you could use that like a hypothesis as a basis to make accurate predictions reliably, then that would be evidence of that hypothesis. But we can't. So the fact that whichever one comes first and can do it reliably is the one that we go with. even though there are many that can all do that.
Your superior and commander of these territories. In spite of my generosity and protection,
What about it?
there are forces in Uzbekistan who refuse to learn the lesson that keep them safe and bring them peace and prosperity.
Sure, but I mean, you could make that prediction. You could say if there are demons, we would find them doing this or something. And if that could make testable predictions, it would still be evidence, even though we've never seen it before.
Senseless attacks in the name of so-called freedom.
Oh, well, no, if they actually could use that hypothesis to make novel testable predictions that no one would ever, that we haven't been able to predict before, that would still be evidence, even though we've never seen it before. So, like, it would only be not evidence if it's something that we've already seen. So if they predicted something we already knew about, like the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and the sun comes up tomorrow, well, that wouldn't be evidence of spirits because we already knew that was going to happen. So in the case of seeing things we already know, and they're just predicting the same things we already know, then that wouldn't be evidence of something new. But if they could predict something new that we haven't seen before, and they were the first ones to predict it, that would still be evidence.
But it was earned and privileged through loyalty and obedience. Together, we can build industry and harvest raw materials.
Well, the testable predictions are always pretty good evidence.
Russia is your ally. We can be flexible.
Cheen, in the past where you prayed to God to take away the depression, how did you rationalize it since God supposedly allows and wants to remove it? I usually use the same Christian apologetic approach where I just said maybe there's some reason or some bullcrap like that. But eventually I stopped being able to do that and just realized, yeah, there's no God there. So, yeah, I rationalized it just by saying there's probably some greater reason bullcrap.
In spite of my generosity and protection, there are forces in Uzbekistan
The oil filters can actually be used as silencers. That is a real thing.
safe and bring them peace and prosperity.
And no problem.
These insurgents continue to launch senseless attacks in the name of so-called freedom.
Cool.
These homegrown terrorists are the cancer in the trade country.
What?
There can be no order and no peace
I have no idea.
until those who side with these savages are permanently eliminated. I am a fair judge and a man of swift justice.
Locke was a theist, right?
There is no judge or jury here. There is only crime and punishment. One by one, we will eliminate these agitators from our streets.
Stephen Sorensen, do I think playing video games is a waste of time when you could be studying more? Ask as I play and wonder. No, I don't think that. Studying is only helpful if you could do something with it. Like, studying just for the sake of studying is pointless. Like, you could just count numbers endlessly, just going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. It's just a waste of time. So studying is only valuable if you're doing it for some purpose, to learn something, to gain something. Just doing it arbitrarily is a waste of time. So, always a balance.
Workers over there.
Yeah, yeah, dude.
Those who believe that my forces will be defeated by these terror tactics and secret plans have made a grave miscalculation. I will never, ever be pushed out of this land by an army of thieves and terrorists. We will root out these interventionists and hold this territory forever. There will be no victory for our enemies.
Oh, that's a good point, Neat Bucks. Yeah.
Russia is here
ethics or morality. It's an unbiased try to make it just.
Oh yeah, thanks, Neatbucks. I did not realize that. Yeah, I had my desktop muted. Now you should be able to hear all the guys from the Discord. All right. The is-ought problem is an interesting one. That's a distinction between, like, what is the ontology of oughts and oughtness. And so, can facts of the universe...
Desires.
What?
Values we hold and want to. That's what Locke said, you know, you have natural desires, even in the natural state. And also Thomas Hobbes, who came with the Leviathan, the violence monopole of the state. They said in the natural state, you have some natural desires, and nobody should be able to interfere with them. But since people have different opinions, desires, we have to have some rules, some violence to enforce that people's rights aren't violated. And that should be the just Leviathan, according to Hobbes. And I very much agree with that law philosophy.
And do you think that solves the is-ought problem?
Yeah, it gave it a direction to solve it, but that's the thing, you know, if you just say there are some natural rights we all have, then it's not yet clear which are our rights. How much harm? That's all in the video I posted about positivistic law versus natural law. How much harm is okay to do to yourself? What if a prisoner goes on hunger strike? Do you force feed him or do you let him die by starvation? There are some ethical problems, of course, in the details, but important is that there are unbiased ethics we have to.
Now, move up.
If your government isn't ethical, you have the right to civil disobedience, to go against the law, the written.
Charges set.
That's our duty. Like in the Nazi state, you know. If you democratically vote to forbid Jews or to kill Jews or to prohibit homosexual rights as well, then you're going against natural rights, and that's unethical in this film.
We're clear. It's time.
And how do you think that solves the is-ought problem?
Well, you have this direction that you know you want to be unbiased and be just for everybody, egalitarian, respect each and everybody's desire.
Well,
like John Rawls, the veil of...
The is-ought problem is stating that how can you get from an is to an ought? Like, what is the ontological connection between the two? So oughts are essentially value statements. There is no objective truth behind them in the is-ought problem. And so
well, that's what open question is falsely concluding, and the Wikipedia page shows pretty nicely how it's false, because you can get a tautological good from nature which you base your ethics upon. That's exactly respecting everybody, every human nature, no matter what sexual orientation or what the Bible says. We just observe what's natural.
How do you get from the is to the ought?
Scientific.
How?
Methodology. You observe, you make a hypothesis, and then you try to falsify. So I make a hypothesis, all people are equal, and you make a hypothesis, no Americans are the best. And then we try to falsify which one is biased, meaning purely subjective, and which one could be forever, which would serve best if you don't know who you are. Rawls' veil of ignorance is you put yourself into a position of not knowing who you are going to be in. That would be objective justice.
But that's just a semantic system. So you can say, given my system, I will get more money, essentially. And therefore, my system must be the most moral because I'm going to end up with more money. So you've come up with a definition, which is all goodness is what's best for the most people. And you've said that what's best for the most people is therefore all goodness. It's circular. So in order to... That doesn't actually solve the Izot problem. It just defines goodness in a way that fits what you want in your model.
Alex, get down. Hide your gun. There's too many.
No, not what I want to be the model. What we observe scientifically to be our desires, our natural...
Alex, get down. Hide your gun. There's too many.
You try to be as little subjective as you can. By
That
just
doesn't
watching
help you, that doesn't help
what
you
happens.
solve the Izot problem, though. It's not what the Izot problem is.
Totally. It solves it totally. The is-ought problem is a false problem. It doesn't exist really. We get oughts from is time. You need some gun laws that make sense, otherwise it's dangerous. We all derive our ethics from the reality. It's just a matter of question in the...
But again, that's not what the Izot problem is actually stating. Again, it's an ontological problem. You haven't actually solved it. You just stated that we can do these things.
Did you read the open question argument?
Yep, G.E. Moore's open question argument I have, and you're just not addressing it. That's kind of the problem.
Do you think the Wikipedia page article...
I have no idea. I haven't read the Wikipedia page article. I read the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Sorry, what?
Shoot the left two. Good work. To the tunnel, quickly. More maybe
So again, the Izot problem is a question of ontology. What is the ontology of oughts? That's the question you have to answer.
Alex, over here.
Yeah, the ontology means what gives existence to something, right? Just to take it to normal terms.
It's this
Everybody.
study of what exists. So yeah, it's like, what is it made of?
Yeah. And natural law philosophy assumes there is naturally the desire of those living,
Hey, Speed, how's it going?
or it observes them even. You can measure them. So where's your ought problem if you are a human and you want to live and you want to make society good for...
So if oughts are
The
a product...
ontology of good comes from your existence, basically, from your natural...
Like, what does that mean? The ontology of good comes from my existence. Like, so how is that different from...
Your existence comes with the desires.
Okay,
So you
but that
have
would just
value-
mean that my desires and the desires of the person who wants to kill me are both equally valid. So you would have to show how does...
But you both have those different values. And that's why those values can be violated by others. Your values can be violated by the values of others to kill you. Therefore, we have to have some rules
Our plan is working.
which give the most protection and freedom.
Shit.
So
But if,
somebody who wants to kill you...
by your definition,
Isn't
you said the ontology of value, or ontology of good is just the values we have, which means there isn't an objective correctness. They're all just equally valid. So you haven't solved the Izot problem. You just said, if we define goodness as our
I
values...
just said in this sentence now, no, we have different...
Let's head down. Get
I'm
over
not
here.
judging which has the better values. I'm not just saying
People today.
killing you is worse
Because of this
than
war,
not
now let's
killing
take
you or
Markov's airbase, so their
life.
deaths are not in vain.
I'm just saying those two
Wrong
exist,
fight.
and now we have to make some rules
It has a plan.
in order not to have war. I want to
Well,
kill you, and you don't want.
that's what the
We
oddness
have a
is. The
problem,
oddness
right?
is trying to determine which of the values are the right ones and which of the values are the wrong ones. Just saying we have values doesn't tell us anything. That's the is-ought problem. It's just saying
No, it's already debunking the is-ought problem, because is-ought problem implies that there is no value from objective observation. You know, but if you observe objectively a human being, you will see it has objectively some desires. One might be to kill you, and the other one might be to be alive and not be killed.
Not bad.
But we observe those desires.
Sticks and stones.
oh, okay, but that's again, why ought we care about one set of values over the other? That's the question. It's not the fact that there are values. It's the question of why ought we prefer one set of systems over the other. That's the is-ought problem. Not the fact that we simply have values is irrelevant. Like, okay, we obviously have values, and we obviously that's an objective part of reality. But again, the question in the is-ought problem is why is any one set of values preferable to any other set of values? That's the problem.
Yeah, and I would say it's better if we have some rules between us, so I don't have to try to kill you, and you don't have to try to preventively kill me, because you know I want to kill you with our different desires. You know? So I would say, wouldn't it be good if we make some laws, give some violence to a police officer who protects our right we agreed upon as a society?
But just saying it's better is kind of missing the point. So the argument is you have to prove it's better, demonstrate it's better. You can't just say it's better. That's
no, that's you can't prove anything. You can only falsify things empirically.
right. So how do you falsify empirically that
You
one's better
assume
than the
you have
other?
a theory.
Speed of sound. What do I disagree with you on? What? Who
You
disagrees?
can't prove something positive. I can't prove to you that human rights are ethically.
Well, that's
But you
kind
could
of the
falsify.
point. Because, like in the is-ought problem, the question is how do you demonstrate an ought like we demonstrate the sun? And we can demonstrate the sun testably, verifiably, falsifiably, but we can't demonstrate morality or oughts in the same way.
You can't also demonstrate this. You can only have a model that explains what the sun,
No, you can demonstrate the sun.
and it might fit or it.
You can scientifically demonstrate the sun. You can look at it. You can make testable predictions with it. You can measure it.
To a
Those are all-
certain degree. Our physics are also just a model of reality, you know, but it hasn't been falsified or only has some problems in some. And that's the same for ethics. You can't say they are.
No, there's
perfect
a very big
and
difference.
prove
Like
them.
in the sun, we can actually demonstrate it. We can falsify it to a certain degree, not with absolute certainty, but the absolute certainty is irrelevant. Whereas in ethics, there is nothing we can do with it. It's essentially
Totally, there's a lot we can do.
no. That's kind of the
I
point.
just
that
told you an example
your examples don't
when
work.
we have conflicting desires.
So again, the problem is how do we demonstrate that
We have this
values-
problem here, right? Somebody wants to kill the other wants to live. Now you ask me how we determine what to do.
No, I don't
And
care how we
tell
determine
you-
what to do. I care what is the objectively the correct answer. Not how we, cause we can. There's lots of different ways we can determine to do things. I want to know what objectively is the correct answer. That's what the oughtness is saying. And we can make
Do
up.
you
a lot.
understand under objectively in this sense here? Can you describe this in other words?
No. That's the problem. Is that how do you come up with an objective standard? And that's what ought is. Like, maybe
Objective means unbiased, having truth in reality for me, regardless of individual subject. And that's what natural law philosophy tries to do.
right,
Going
so,
into an objective
So how do you show
that
that
you are not
oughtness-
biased towards any.
Right, that's the point, but the oughts are only biased. How do you show that there is an ought that isn't a bias? Because they're all just a bias. That's what the problem is. Like, how do you show that they're not just imaginary things?
A value is not necessarily a bias.
That's what biases are. It's just values. You determine a certain choice or decision or action based off of a set of values. That's bias. What bias is.
1 over. If you just value life, you are not biased towards any life. Right? On the life, you
No,
are
if
just
you value
valuing.
life, then you're biased towards life. That's what it means.
And if you value the universe and every idea, you value everything. You're not biased towards everything. You just value. Alright.
Okay, but then that doesn't. Again,
I
that
can
doesn't
just
get us
make the
anywhere.
subset bigger. I can make the set as big as I want. And then I'm just valuing stuff. I'm not having a priority over anything else, you know. I just can say I.
Okay, but that doesn't really help answer the
It's
question
good
at
to-
all. Like, again, so how do you determine what is the correct oughtness? What is the objective oughtness that's true independent of values? That's just, what is the truth independent of our subjective opinion?
Well, we can fight if we have those different desires conflicting, or we make an order. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying I would prefer, personally, if we have some order and would not have to.
Okay, but again, how does that solve the problem? Because the problem is, it's not, in the is-ought problem isn't about what you prefer. Like, we can grant what you prefer, but the question is what is the correct truth independent of what you prefer?
The Leviathan. The violence monopole.
That's still a preference.
He
so
enforces
why is that true?
my preference of having peace and rules over anarchistic fight for everybody's desire.
But that's still a preference, so you haven't determined why that's true independent of our preference.
Yeah, you still think that you can prove things.
Again, prove is
objectively
used just in a probabilistic sense. So yes, we can prove things probabilistically. So again, you haven't shown how that all you said is that you have these preferences, but you haven't actually shown that your
Yeah, and
preferences
I would
are.
say that the majority of people have those. Majority of people would prefer some rules voted on than having no rules and everybody can do what he wants.
Okay,
Yeah.
but again, the fact that you have the preference doesn't answer the question. The question is why should we believe something objectively true independent of preference? You have to get rid of all preference. Any reference to preference just immediately makes it subjective. So you have to make it, to answer the ought question, you need to make it not subjective.
Why do you have to get rid of every?
Because that's the problem.
problematic.
The problem is how do we determine what is objectively true independent of subjective preferences? So you have to filter out the preferences to know what is objectively true.
No, not the preferences. Just your bias towards one set of.
Preferences and biases are the same thing. They're synonymous.
No, that's what I tried to tell you. But
No, that's
I
what I
can enlarge
demonstrated
this.
to you earlier, is that if you have a
I
set of...
value everything. What do I prioritize? I value the universe.
You prioritize everything over nothing, so that would still be a bias towards everything as opposed to nothing. So, but again, that's irrelevant to the argument.
And yes.
So just saying you
there's no
can
nothing
value
to-
everything doesn't help you
to
solve
have.
the problem, because it doesn't give you any discernible difference.
I tried to show you can value something and not be biased, not be
No, but you failed. I proved
prioritizing
that false, so that
something.
doesn't work. Like, if you value everything, then you prefer everything to nothing. That's still a preference. So no matter what, if you value something, any collection
No,
of things, it's necessarily biased.
Nothing is just an abstract. Show.
You can value abstracts. You can prefer abstracts. That's not a problem. So again, anything you value is by definition a preference. That is, they're synonymous terms.
That's the problem with all the general philosophy. It's interesting ideas, but it's not practical.
Practicality
If
is
you make
irrelevant to
law,
truth.
you need rules for society, which the majority of the society agree to. And then you need rules to make sure we don't fight each other, try to kill each other, whatever, in order to have this peace, you know? So you can argue as long as you want, whether it's objectively, universally true, but I just say we have those preferences, those are objectively measured, and we have to make a system that most people can get along.
That's fine, I can agree with all of that, but that's not the ISOT problem. If you're actually trying to address the ISOT problem, well, then you need to actually address what the problem is, which is how do we determine what oughts are objectively independent of preferences? Like, if you don't answer that question, you're just not answering the ISOT problem, you're answering a different question. So...
Well, the problem of the open question argument, which is the is-ought problem,
no, those are separate
is
problems.
that it's false. It's fallacious to assume you can't get an ought from an is. It's already fallacious to think that's a claim you make, which isn't holding water.
G.E. Moore's open question argument and Hume's is-ought problem are not the same problem. They are different problems. And
Distinguish, please.
Distinguish? You can just Google them. They're just literally not the same problem.
I did read both, and it seems exactly to be the same problem.
Then you read something wrong, because G.E. Moore's
show
open
me
question
how they're
argument
not.
is what makes the good. Like, why is that good? Whereas the is-ought problem is there's a distinction between two different classes of things. So, I mean, they're both trying to figure out what the good is, and so in that way they're similar, but they're not the same problem.
Ontology of good, what you're asking for all the time.
Yes,
and what
they're both
law philosophy tells you we solve.
No.
We having natural law philosophy. You just don't learn law philosophy in general philosophy.
No, we do in general philosophy. We do also
law
understand
philosophy
law
is the
philosophy.
actual-
But law philosophy is pragmatic, which is irrelevant to objective truth. Pragmatism has nothing to do with objective truth. So you can say it's unpragmatic.
Okay.
Like
all
we can't.
science.
No. Wait. So we can say it's unpragmatic that we can't measure that there's a teapot going around Mars. We don't have the technological capabilities, but it is still objectively either true or false that there is one going or is not one going around Mars. So the pragmatic usefulness of an idea is completely irrelevant to the objective truth. They're two different classes of questions. So if the philosophy is asking what is the objective truth, talking about what's pragmatic is just irrelevant. Like, it's a different class of questions. Like, you're not answering the actual question.
Can you apply that to evolution theory?
Yes, like we could say, for example, 200 years ago, if Darwin said that there was some common descent mechanism, but it was unpragmatic to talk about DNA because they had no way to measure it. The DNA was still objectively true before Darwin. He just couldn't measure it pragmatically. And so, based off your system, he would be wrong to invoke DNA because it wasn't pragmatic to try and use it as an explanation since they couldn't measure it. But it was still true objectively. So the philosophers who were talking about objective truth would still be applying the DNA even if it was unpragmatic to do so. So it's two different classes of questions.
I'm not sure I could follow that analogy.
So,
Darwin had the theory correct in your truth sense? It would be correct, the theory of evolution, but it's a subjective theory of...
What? I have no idea what you're talking about. So, pragmatism is just what we can do with what we have now. That's all it is. And then objective truth is what's true regardless of whether or not we can know it. So, the philosophers are talking about what's true regardless of what we can know, and the pragmatic truth is just, well, what's true that we can show is true. Those are two different classes of questions. So the is ought question is asking what is the objective truth regardless of whether or not we can know it, kind of thing. The pragmatic question
What is true without we can...
Damn it.
What is true without us knowing it?
The original. I think a good example is, like, do you believe there are butterflies flying on Earth right now? Yeah, okay. So, you could potentially find out exactly how many butterflies are in the air at the same time if you take a snapshot of Earth right now. But we cannot know that number. You know, it would be impossible for us with our current technology. But there is probably one number that represents this answer. And I think
it's a fact we don't have access to, right?
Well, it's either going to be an odd or an even number.
It's true. That's a good example. The butterflies odd and even. That's a good example.
Yeah, that's what law philosophy also assumes of ethics. You know? That there are ethics to be discovered and not inventions, not subjectively, not just a convention, but you discover justice. You don't make.
Okay, but the question is how do we discover it? How do we discover it independent of opinion? That's the problem. Like, I agree there is no moral realist.
You can't. We are all subjects, you know. We only have our values and opinions and senses. We just have to be as unbiased.
I'm wondering though, the original, you said you just value everything equally or something like that. You just value the universe. How could you act if you don't have like any different...
That was just a hypothetical example.
Yeah, he
that
was
it's
using
value
that
and
for
not
the sake of
priority. I have a lot of values. For example, natural law philosophy. I think that's great ethics because it's really unbiased, you know. Trans rights, homosexual rights, those are all natural rights because we found out with psychology, empirical psychology, that those are natural states of the human natural variation. Human rights are based on secular natural philosophy. It's not just somebody's subjective opinion or the majority vote.
But homosexual rights and trans rights, aren't they just human rights?
Exactly. They are just natural secular rights of everybody. Because you go into it you can't say I prefer heterosexuality or that's what makes it unbiased. But it's a tricky distinction because subjective can be everything that's coming from subjects, you know. So you could say it's subjective to have ethics, but it's just the rules we observe to guide our...
But I mean, then there's the unstated premise that you haven't stated explicitly, but you have to hold to make that moral framework.
We need to take Barkov's airbase.
I know what to do. I'm going to ram it. 3-1 to Watcher. We're moving to the tarmac. Where's that air support?
Echo 3-1 PAM.
I mean, so Theo, you believe something like, okay, if it's something that humans, it comes naturally to humans or whatever, you know, it's good, right?
It comes naturally to humans, it's good.
Yeah.
If it's the human nature, I think it's worth protecting. Yeah. it's worth respecting and protecting. Because we are human nature, so why shouldn't we protect ourselves?
See, that's the thing, right? How to justify that proposition, but I mean, there's also and there's also going to be that it's going to lead us to conclusions that most people
How to
at least
justify?
don't like.
Sorry, I fell in your words.
I really
sorry.
don't think any of us are trying to put down your results. We're only trying to discuss like the philosophical, the lowest underpinning of whether this has opinion in it or not.
Opinion? Like values?
Yes. Yes, values and opinions are in the same category in relation to human, for example.
And you think mathematics has no value, no opinions from human side, but ethics does have a lot of subjective opinions from human?
I think there are parts of mathematics that are derived by all mathematicians coming from all directions, and parts are subjective, which parts are chosen or some interpretation obviously have some subjectivity to it.
Or physics, you know, that's maybe easier because there we already have some big problems. Dark matter, dark energy.
Oh, physics
you know,
is
I
lovely.
would say it's just a model we have. It's the best model we have. It's not yet falsified. It's useful, and so are ethics for our laws. You know, you can, of course, you can say you can't prove that those are universally true in the universe, even if no humans are around. But it serves our purpose, and yeah, it's the best laws we have. And it's better than some Nazi positivistic law where you say we can vote on anything. If we vote to kill all the Jews and take their money, then we do so.
You
That
keep
would be
giving
really
me a very convincing utilitarian argument while trying to show me that it's subjective.
The difference between physics and morality is that physics we can't change by fiat. It doesn't matter what we think is the case. The sun is always going to be there. We can't stop it from being there or change the sun to a different color if we want to. It's objectively true, independent of opinion, but we can change the value system, just like we can change our preference in art or whatever. So the difference between morality and physics is that physics is true independent of opinion, whereas morality isn't. That's kind of the problem.
That's right. That's right.
That's what?
And if the Nazis would have theoretically won and killed everybody except him, just hypothetically, then that could be the society the majority thinks that's their.
Right.
But
what is it?
It was cruel. It would be from a natural law perspective, it would have been a cruel time and killing of a lot of people, which is unethically if you consider everybody. So that's why the law tries always to be keeping everybody worth the same. Of course, you can't prove it that's the case, but I like the idea. It's an ideal.
Okay, you're really quiet. I can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Barely. Go to your settings and turn up your volume, like your Discord settings.
Or you can also boost the mic in the Windows settings. Usually. I think that's very interesting, all those ethical discussions, and I also like the internet and those social media. If we can internationally exchange different morals, different rules, different... And you will never get everybody on the same page. I think we just have to keep a coexistence.
Still really quiet.
Try again? Yeah, it was quiet.
I'll just darn or something.
That's a lot better.
Yeah, you just try to talk louder as much as possible, and we'll try to hear you.
honorable.
Who? Oh, the consciousness one. Yeah, that was a really interesting one. The or theory of consciousness. I think he has a very interesting interpretation of what consciousness is. The theory that consciousness is a product of synchronized vibrations of proteins. I mean, I don't... If he can actually make testable predictions with it, that'd be really cool, and I would admit that he's probably right. I don't think he has yet, so it's just an interesting theory and an interesting interpretation. But it was a very good interview. I did enjoy it.
Fuck, them bacteria could be conscious.
Think I missed something. Gotta rewatch.
He asked about my interview with Anubang, the professor from MIT, who was talking about the or theory of consciousness.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, unfortunately. Going to.
And he actually said it's a synchronized vibration of proteins, Tom?
It was the microtubules, which are the things that are inside of the proteins inside of the cells, and the way the microtubules work is that they vibrate in a synchronized order, and that synchronized vibration is the product of consciousness. Or is what produces consciousness, not the product. Yeah, what produces consciousness.
I think if I described waves on the ocean... Go ahead.
So why do you think a lot of people think this stuff is...
Think a lot of people think what?
This stuff is...
Well, I mean, it's just an interpretation. It's not based off of like solid evidence yet, so. Until he could actually demonstrate it, it's just an interpretation, kind of like Einstein's curvature and bending of space-time. It was really weird at the time, but if he could demonstrate it, it'd be really cool. Until then, it's just an interpretation.
So, what do you, I mean, some people, I talked to this guy, Alan Aldridge, and he thinks that what do you think of that? Do you think that's getting into that doctor?
No, he specifically said at the beginning it has nothing to do with like God or of any kind. It's just a physical theory, so it's purely material. No spiritual consciousness stuff at all. It's just a material thing.
Right. Do you think when he says it does indicate theism, you think it's every kind of theism, or just
No, he said it doesn't indicate theism. Or the guy I had the interview with said it doesn't indicate any kind of theism at all. It's just has nothing to do with theism or God at all.
Yeah, I mean, do you think he meant like any kind of theism, or just like not pantheism, but what do you call a God that's outside of our universe? I forgot.
Deism? Yeah, he meant no kind of God. So he said that specifically it's just a physical theory. So it's just a scientific, physical, materialistic reductionist theory, just like every other one. There's no implications about the supernatural or a God at all. It's just science, and that's it.
Okay, gotcha.
I think that was the first thing he said. He actually started with that. He's like saying that this has nothing to do with the God. That's why I like it. It's completely irrelevant to the God question.
Does he think it opens the possibility to like an afterlife?
That would mean it's possible. It's just unlikely. Since it's the vibrations in the proteins that cause it. If your body dies and the proteins die, well then your consciousness also dies. So there wouldn't be an afterlife in that situation unless some other way to synchronize the vibrations.
I see. Everyone inside! Clear the hangar! So earlier I heard you talking about natural law. Do you think that there is like an I didn't really get to hear the whole thing, but do you think that there is some kind of objective natural law out there, or do you think morality is more like more...
I think it's more of like an abstract concept. Like I think that the idea of a perfect triangle doesn't exist. There is no perfect triangle out there in the universe hiding like a platonic object. But we can use actual objects like mountains or things to say, well, this is approximately a triangle, and then we can infer from that the idealistic consequence of that to say that there's this idea that is the perfect triangle. So we can look at our world and then like we can look at a mountain and then infer from that we can get a more perfect triangle if we do this. And then morality is that. It's the idea that there is a way to make the world better, a better triangle, a better moral world, essentially. Ouch.
Yeah, that's good.
What are your thoughts on social contract? Because I was talking about it yesterday on the ACA server. And what do you think would, like, I'm not sure if I'm understanding a social contract, but there is, I guess, you are obligated to treat society in a certain way because you live amongst others, right? That's basically what it is, right?
Well, what do you mean is flawed? So a social contractarianism is just a model that we use. It's just a pragmatic model to say, well, here's how we can establish laws to make a pragmatic world. It's not about truth at that point. It's just about saying, let's just make stuff, do stuff this way because it works. It's like a utilitarianism kind of thing.
I mean, but does that mean it's always warranted though? Because, I mean, let's just say theoretically, society would be better off if we're gonna get boxed in. I mean, would that be okay?
No, under social contractarianism, it would say that the social contract is an agreement between the people, including those that you would potentially kill, and the government, and you are obligated to adhere to that social contract, which is usually in the best interest of the people who agreed to it. And so if you like agreed to be in a social contract with the government and the government kills you, that would be breaching the social contract.
Echo 3-1, Viper 1-1 on approach, ready for tasking. What's your position?
Exactly. What's like the criteria? Like, how do you decide what's better for society?
Could use some help. What do you got?
Oh shit. I think that was determined. I haven't researched enough of the social contractarianism to actually try and figure that out. I think he created a model where we should potentially be able to determine that, but based off of his definition, I just don't know what it is because I didn't care to research it that detailed. I don't think so. I think social contractarianism has to do with fulfilling needs and freedoms, not about arbitrary things like that. But again, you'd have to ask someone who is an expert and actually researched social contractarianism. Sully Sullivan asked, I would like to know if you think Anderson was referring to meaning as truth. Sort of, yes, that's exactly what he was doing. He was saying that the truth bearer is a thing that exists independent of us. So you have the truth maker, whatever is reality, and then you have the language that we use to describe reality, and there's some other thing, some third thing between those things that makes the statement correspond to reality, and that thing, that third thing, the truth bearer, exists. But it doesn't. It's just a definition. It's just an arbitrary label we use. So he was in fact doing that same meaning as truth kind of distinction.
Didn't you also say that objects have property truth?
What? Objects have property truth? What do you mean?
Yeah, things that are real have truth property. I'm not sure if things can have, like, real physical things can have the property truth. Just this, right?
Yeah, that's kind of his argument, but truth isn't the property. Truth is just a description, a sentence. It's a property of a sentence, not a property of a thing.
Yeah.
Activision login.
I can't even follow the written chat and the voice chat at the same time. I'm so bad at multitasking. I couldn't game at the same time. I sometimes do, but then I just run around.
We're at the rear gate, Sergeant. Move up.
How do you add someone on profile? Account linking. No, it's already linked. Friends.
What are you playing after all?
I'm playing Modern Warfare.
Now, Sergeant.
Okay.
It's the new one. It's Activision account option.
Ah, great graph. I'm just too anti-military to play some military games. But I'm Unreal Tournament.
Trying to figure out how to add people, add friends on the Activision account thing. Oh, what's that? No. Close channels. Nope. Back. Social. Add friends. There we go. That'll work. That'll work. All right. 2250. Is it working?
That's the old problem, right?
Which
is
problem?
good what God defines to be good? Or is it, or does God has to obey the same is good outside of his definition?
Yeah, that's the Euthyphro dilemma.
Mhm. And also that would be clearly answered by secular natural law. They would say God has to obey to the same universal ethics as everyone. They would be outside of subjective opinion. And we approach them, as you said, with sciences. We only approach the truth or the facts.
How would that solve the Euthyphro dilemma? Saying that natural laws solve the Euthyphro dilemma?
Yeah, because God has to obey to the good rules. God doesn't define the good rules. There are some rules. Under the assumption that there are universal ethics, we have to discuss. God can only follow them or ignore them. He doesn't define them.
Well, that would just be an answer. You're saying that God obeys the law. There's a reason God is good. So that would be like the first horn of the dilemma. But that wouldn't solve the dilemma. That would just mean God is in the dilemma.
No, I'm not saying he necessarily follows. I think he only has those two options.
Oh yeah, well in that case then the theist would be defeated because if they have to answer one of those two questions, they lose. So the goal of a
What you
theist
say?
is to escape and say no, it's not. We can join.
No, it's like Mike Max in chat here says, right? But if he defines the existence, he makes good. That would be the other side, contrary to the natural, which says there are some ethical rules beyond subjective opinion.
Oh my god, why is I hate how this game takes you have to like download a million things to actually be able to play this game. It's so dumb. Oh my god. Is it like 9 gigabytes too?
Something is wrong with my YouTube, I think. It only shows one view.
One what?
We are so many people. On your YouTube, it only shows...
The viewers are...
Oh yeah,
no,
probably.
It's 2.
It's buggy.
So...
On mine it says 14 watching now, something like that. 16.
So did you only privately, autodidactically study philosophy?
Yeah, sort of. I audited classes, which you can go to college and take the classes you just want to take, and you're not going for a degree, and you audit them that way because it's cheaper.
Ah, that's great. Did you also sit into a law philosophy?
Well, yeah, law philosophy is a part of the philosophy classes. It's just pragmatic philosophy as opposed to idealistic philosophy. Oh my god.
Yeah, but it's the empirical one, you know. That's what I'm trying to get people to. People think, you know, in America, in English language, science is philosophy. In German and European languages, scientia, science is also philosophy.
Well, originally in the Greek, science was just natural philosophy. That's what it was originated as. So.
Exactly. It still is. You still get a PhD, philosophy doctor, if you make any natural science. But that's the good part of philosophy, the empirical one, the practical one, not the I assume that you can't get an ought from an is. Because that leads you to nowhere. Also not solipsism that you think we can't prove actually anything, you know. That doesn't help us. As you say, I cherish those who are useful, those theories. So I prefer law philosophy to any general philosophy.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, it's totally fair. I usually prefer the... Why is it that up there?
Yeah, sounded like you're on that track too.
I mean, yeah, I prefer pragmatic stuff in a lot of ways, but it's useful to have both.
Certainly, yeah. It's also interesting, you know. Something doesn't always have to be useful, it just can be entertaining, right? To think about stuff differently.
Yep.
And I saw already, I met you on the David Wally stream, and I saw you're very intelligent asking questions, and I like that.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm usually getting a lot of opposition for my secular natural law philosophy. People are rather bound to the general philosophers than to the law philosophers.
I set up on the edge of Barkov's base. Keep those fucking dogs in check. Friends close, enemies closer.
But how do you argue with a Nazi who says we voted democratically to kill all the Jews? If you don't have a standard, a golden ethical standard, you know.
Well, I do. I believe in moral realism. So I would say that there is an objective truth to morality, which is the best of all possible worlds, and that agreement that you democratically elected to eradicate the Jews would be moving us away from the objective truth. Therefore, it's factually wrong. So you can still choose to do it. You would just be immoral objectively by the objective standard. So I argue for moral realism.
That's cool, yeah. Yeah, that's basically what I'm arguing. Just I argue from the desire perspective, you know. Even the Jew has the desire to live, and he has to be treated equally than everybody else. You can't just arbitrarily define some cultures as more valid than others. And even for the psychopath or the pedophile, if we found out that's natural variation, then we have to make sure they don't harm anybody, but we have to respect them and give them a worthy life, you know. You can't just kill every psychopath. That's a hot topic.
Chin asked, which Christian philosopher do you think would appeal more to atheists, Swinburne or Plantinga? Swinburne for sure. Swinburne believes free will is impossible. So he agrees with most atheists in that sense, whereas Plantinga has a lot more stranger beliefs. Kefe asked, have you ever tried DMT or ayahuasca before? I've tried some drugs. I don't think I tried either of those. Isn't David Wood a psychopath? Apparently. I think he was actually diagnosed with psychopathy, yeah.
That's also interesting. Do you think rationality involves empathy?
No. I think you can be rational. Like yeah, so you can be rational without empathy.
Secure.
For example, you could be a psychopath and understand morality if you had a model, a rational model to articulate it. So you don't need empathy to be rational.
That's interesting. I never thought of it this way. So you could reason yourself to empathy rationally.
Yeah. You essentially, without actually
empathy.
intuitively feeling it, you can just define it.
Yeah, that's great. I like that idea, but that for me, also in German, Vernunft, also that's reason, rationality or reasonability, involves also that you're like humble and empathic. That's part of rationality. But you're right, you can also analytically reason yourself rationally. But that would be utilitarian.
Well, that's kind of like how I came to my position on veganism. Like, I eat meat, but I recognize that killing animals is morally wrong. And so even though I don't feel empathy for animals, I recognize the immorality of it simply due to my moral model.
You consider killing animals
Morally wrong, yeah.
by
2 X-rays down.
for food?
Yeah, for any reason. I think animals are conscious creatures, and killing anything that is a conscious creature is immoral.
I think.
But the lion isn't immoral by hunting.
I think the original. I think you mentioned harm when in your morality system, and I don't think TJump uses harm in his value system.
Yeah, mine is about freedom and choice. So I would say that the lion would actually, not the lion specifically, but the nature that caused the lion to kill would be immoral.
The evolution, how it happened that we have carnivores and vegetarians.
Yeah, I consider nature to be immoral. I think the way nature is immoral, and there because it's like if you describe the best way the world could be.
I consider it rather amoral, you know.
Yeah, most
not
people
guided
do.
by any.
That's the most
But
interpretation.
immoral.
But my personal interpretation is that nature.
If you.
My personal interpretation is that nature is immoral. I think that nature is immoral, not amoral.
First floor secure.
So if you would go against your objective, then you're acting immoral.
There's
even
no
if it's a natural happening, not guided.
Yes, so anything like my definition of morality is the description of the best of all possible worlds, and anything that goes against that description is immoral. So, for example, if a rock falls on you, that world is immoral. It's less moral than the best of all possible worlds because that thing happened.
So suffering is not part of ideal world. Right?
So what?
Suffering.
Suffering. Yes. Oh no. Suffering is okay if it's optional. So it's involuntary suffering that would not be a part of the ideal world. You can choose to suffer if you want to, and that's totally fine. But if there's any involuntary suffering, that would not be the best of all possible worlds.
Roger, moving.
Floor secure.
TJump?
Yep.
In your morality system, are there any moral acts you could do?
Yeah, you can help people. So, for example, you could choose to be in a world like a video game with a very hard difficulty where there's lots of suffering, essentially, and someone else could come into your world and actually help you to play cooperatively in the video game and beat the video game, and that would be moral. So, for example, just to put it in the context of this world, if you're playing a really hard video game and you're trying to learn how to beat the boss or whatever, and someone comes along and helps you in a co-op to beat the boss, that would be moral because you're helping them to achieve their values.
Cool.
If he wants to help.
Yep, you have to want to help it. If it wasn't voluntary, it wouldn't be moral.
But doesn't the morality require a
You cut out what?
Doesn't the morality or immorality require a consciousness? Somebody who...
There needs to be a consciousness to be affected, but it doesn't need a consciousness to be an action. So a rock can fall on someone and that's immoral because it affects a consciousness, but you don't need the rock to be conscious for it to be immoral. Because again, by my definition, morality is just the description of the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, but the best involves also some subjective values.
Well,
Your
that's
best is no suffering. I would say if a stone drops from the kicked by another animal from the mountain and it hits a man and he's dead, that's not immoral. That's just an accident that happened.
right, and that's how my model is different. My model says that's immoral because that's not the best of all possible worlds. Only the best of all possible worlds is the measure of morality.
I guess if the world allows for immoral actions to happen, then it's not perfect or something, right?
Essentially, yeah. So, if a world allows rocks to fall on people, that's immoral. That world is not the description of the best of all possible worlds.
Clear.
Oh, fucking hell. She was going for a bloody detonator.
Good job we dropped it in.
Sully Sullivan, why do you like Pete's Buttigieg? I heard you say you might want money out of politics, and he's bought off corporate shill. He's less of a bought off corporate shill than Clinton or sort of Trump. He's kind of sort of bought off. So he's less bad. I don't like any politicians. I think they're all terrible and useless, but Buttigieg is less bad than the rest of them, other than like Yang. Yang is pretty good. Booty Judge, that's right. Booty Judge.
Bernie's basically like European social dem. Most reasonable.
Well, Bernie's ideas are the most right, but his applications and how to get to them are completely batshit crazy. Like, so he has no pragmatic way to get from our current system to what his ideals are, and that's the biggest problem with Bernie, is that he just doesn't. He has the right ideals, he just doesn't have a methodology, a reasonable methodology to get there.
And all my fighters.
He's going their pound of flesh.
What's your fear there? What do you think is the problem?
I told you we would help you.
If he would get...
So the challenge is that you have to essentially move in increments. Like, how do you get from our system currently to the, what's it, like free healthcare and free education, all that stuff. You can't just go all or nothing, because the biggest problems of why we can't do those things is due to how our capitalistic system causes an increase in price for those things. So just paying off the drug companies and saying, okay, we're going to accept your prices and just pay it for everyone is bankrupt America. That's not possible. So to implement universal health care, what you need to do is get rid of the laws that make it illegal for the government to negotiate prices with drug companies so that we can decrease the prices of drugs and then pay for the drugs. Or negotiate prices for drugs with other companies.
We'll be here until sunrise.
That's exactly what Bernie sounds like.
Well, no, Bernie
doesn't want to accept big pharma terms. He will dictate them by law how the healthcare has. And that's also what's in Europe the case. You know, we don't have free healthcare. We just have mandatory private healthcare. But it's also social. You know.
Well, yeah, but the problem is that you can't go straight from our system to their system. It would be like a heroin addict just going cold turkey, stopping on heroin. It would cause an economic collapse. The problem is that Bernie just wants to do that essentially instantly, and it would cause too much of an economic problem. So you have to go in small stages and move there slowly, not just cold turkey, destroy the economy kind of thing.
All day.
Nice work hitting the Russians.
We share friends and
I think
enemies.
some economies are supposed to be destroyed.
I mean, technically, yes, some economies are really bad, but doing so would cause more deaths than the economies do. So I would not advocate for that. I would go with a slow and steady wins the race kind of a way.
Bad guys around here. Shit's fucked up.
Hustle 3-1. Let's go.
Can someone ask TJump if there is a possible best of possible worlds that's built on a different value system than his freedom conception? Well, all the best of all possible world is just every individual value gets to define their own system, their own world. So yes, I mean every person would be able to define their own system of values and how they want to live their world in my system. So if there was anything better, that's one of the options in my system. So there can't technically be anything better.
Northbound at checkpoint Omaha, 1-2.
Copy. Rally at the intersection in 1 mic.
Do I want religion to end? No, I don't actually care what people believe. It doesn't make a difference to me at all. I want the best of all possible worlds, essentially, for all possible wills, so everyone can decide what to do for themselves. If you want to live in a world and have a god in it, like, go for it, fine. Just as long as you just can't force anybody else to do the same. That's what
But how
matters.
far do we go there?
How far do we go what?
Should we remove every stone from the mountains so nobody can get hit by...
Sort of. So it would be more like we should have enough control over the laws of physics to make it so that if a rock falls, it won't hurt you unless you allow it to. But we would like literally just remove rocks. That would be hilarious, though.
I think that's not realistic, but I think that's basically what the stage should do. Yeah, like pretty safe for.
Sorry about that.
Get moving! Watch your that!
Would TJump regard a rock to commit an immoral action if "you're an idiot" is written on it from a permanent marker and it offends someone? No. Offense is not immoral, so you can say whatever you want. No words are immoral. No thoughts are immoral. Only involuntary restrictions of will. So if someone, like, if you physically force someone to not do something or to take away their freedom, that's immoral. But there are no words that are immoral. There are no offenses that are immoral.
What about actions that take a world closer to the perfect world? Are those actions amoral or moral or maybe immoral?
Moral. So I mean, like, if someone is hungry and you feed them, and that helps them to achieve their will, it moves us closer to the best of all possible worlds, and that would be moral. Yeah, genius track. Stephen Gray's hair, creepiness, drama queen, and overall disposition is immoral. Genius. I wish. Steve McRae is weird. So I don't think Steve McRae is immoral. I think Steve McRae is weird. Kind of a dick, but I don't know.
General Phil.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah.
What's the dispute based on other than him just being kind of petty and childish? I mean, I remember hearing you when you went on the after show on the when they had Chris, they had Jim Majors on, and all those guys, and it seemed to stem from that. And I don't know what the dispute was, but I was pretty pissed off. I used to be a pretty big fan of Steve, but just the way they treated you in general, I thought it was really abusive. But then I still don't understand. They were saying stuff about how you were confusing ontology and epistemology, and is that what this is all about? It seemed like it got personal for some reason. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was. They were criticizing, like, the fact that for the IP debate, something about us not addressing his arguments directly or something. Like, I think somebody said I was confusing epistemology and ontology. I wasn't. I never did. So I don't know what that criticism was supposed to be about. But Steve's problem with me is that, firstly, I disagree with his use of atheism. Like, I can just grant, I don't care what the philosophers use the word atheism for. I'm going to use the word in the way that the most colloquial sense uses it, and he takes issue with that. Steve is extremely pedantic on language. If you don't use language exactly the way he thinks it should be used, then he thinks you're wrong. Like, you're objectively wrong because you don't use language in this exact way, which is just not how language works. He's just too pedantic, and he's been corrected on that multiple times. So there isn't, I mean, nothing he actually says is really representative of my position. Like, he says, I don't research ever for any debates, when I obviously do. And he's never actually looked at my epistemology. He says it sucks, but he's never read it. So Steve is just an idiot.
Well, the ironic thing is that he has, in the past, said that you can define this atheism however you want. And then he just goes on and on and on about how it has to be the philosophical one.
Yep.
But, yeah, it's just inane and pointless after a while. I mean, he's just, like, over and over. He's obsessive. And he seems to be obsessive about his dislike. I don't get it at all. I mean, I've watched both of you guys, and I don't understand it. Why is it so personal?
That's just Steve's personality. He is a drama whore. So that's just how he acts. Because I did those debates I did the debates where I was defending Kyle and saying, well, he could be innocent.
Yeah,
we should just wait until he's...
Yeah, that's what I was, right. I remember that. That's what I was going to point out. That I remember that where you went on and you talked to him. You were kind of taking a neutral stance, and he didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he didn't agree with you on philosophical points, which, how many people agree on philosophical issues anyway?
Yeah.
I mean, to be personal, I don't get that, because philosophical arguments happen constantly. So I don't see why that's a personal issue. It seemed to me maybe it was more to do with the fact that you were...
Yeah, he took it personally. If people don't agree with Steve on things, he takes it personally. He's like extremely offended. Like, how dare you disagree with me?
Yeah, thanks. I wondered if there was more, like, because I don't follow Twitter. Wondered if something happened on there, and then like Chris Hansen is like, those.
Yeah, the Chris Hansen biblical history skeptic, that guy. He's also pretty sensitive. I don't really have any problem with him. Just really sensitive SJW type.
Yeah.
I think he blocked me on Twitter.
It. I mean, Ocean was getting on.
Yeah, me and Ocean had like a really long conversation on Twitter. He thought, I forget what it was about. It's something about how, like, something about one of the analogies I use. I don't remember, but he got it wrong. He thought it meant something it didn't, and I had to like correct him with it over and over and over again to get him to understand that, which he understood for about 5 minutes, and then he just went back to not understanding it. So.
And on long, I don't know if you've already talked about what do you.
You cut out what? You asked what do I...
In general, yeah, any I know you've been, you mentioned a few of the debates you have scheduled, but you have scheduled so far coming.
Yeah, I actually have a conversation with Skylar Fiction tonight, interview thing. I think about 5 or 6 of them set up for the next few weeks. I don't remember.
Oh, that's cool.
Let's see.
Skylar, I like his point of view. I think he's kind of like an everyday guy, and I like his approach to the Bible because it's very just root of it. And I've seen Christians really squirm and just ignore the facts of the Bible when they talk to him, and he doesn't let them off the hook. That's what I like about listening to Skylar. I think he just really gets to the root and doesn't let go of it.
Yeah, I like Skylar. He's a like a average Joe kind of guy. He keeps it simple without going into too much like super technical stuff, and just this is how everyday people just interpret that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and he doesn't try to get into areas he doesn't know philosophy. I mean, some he does, but I mean, not a lot. He doesn't try to get into evolution. He knows he's not qualified to talk about evolution, so he doesn't try to. And I think that's really an honest approach. Have you that you were trying to line up something with Ozzy, but I kind of wonder if there's something in the background where Steve is trying to like to try to talk him out of talking to you. Do you get that sense at all?
Yeah,
'Cause I
I'm
know
pretty
you were
sure.
going
I'm pretty
to.
sure that's what happened. Like, I don't think.
Is
I
that
think,
right? Yeah. That's so childish.
yeah.
I Ozzy was in one of the chats and I asked him about it and he said, "Yeah, we were trying to line up something, but he didn't. It might have been one of your debates. He was in the chat."
Yeah, we were gonna do something a while ago, but he stopped messaging me. So, Lacko asks, "Do you think your morality system is compatible with anarchism, or do you see some other political ideology that comes close to it?" Yeah, there was one political ideology that was really close. I forget what it was called, but it was something about freedom to go to any city. I have it saved somewhere. I can probably try to find it. Robert Nozick. It's Robert Nozick's political system. That's what it was. That's the one that's really similar to mine. I forget what he called it, though.
How do you think it comes about that there is not a African geology and a German geology and an
Well, there actually were geologies specific to certain regions, but some of them were proven wrong, and eventually, after they all got proven wrong, there was one that was right, which is usually the European one, hilariously enough. And then it became just the standard. It stopped being called European or their ideology. It was just the right one.
Yeah, but I wanted to point at empiricism, that you have to test stuff.
Yeah.
If you're empirical, scientific, you land on the same facts for everybody, right? The same
Yep.
So that's the best way, I would say, to gain knowledge, epistemology.
Yeah, objective verification and showing something is true, independent of opinion, is definitely the way to go.
Yeah. And I claim law has to do the same. It's also an empirical. It can't just say we define those to be the. If everybody agrees, then we go with it.
Sully asked, "Would you be down for a conversation where someone tries to convert you two into a Bernie bro?" Sure. I love political conversations. Those are really interesting. I wish we could do more of them, especially on modern day debate. So I'm definitely down for political conversations.
I'm already excited for Bernie.
I would actually love it if Bernie
were,
won.
You were recently on Modern Day Debate with, was it? I'm trying to think. It was like a creationist, I think.
I've been on with a few of them. Which one?
The most recent one. Was it empiricism or?
I thought the most recent one was the flat Earth one.
Okay, the flat Earth. So what's your takeaway? I mean, just in general, because I kind of categorize those guys together. I mean, do you think it's like with
My takeaway from about what specifically?
they think they're so smart? Well, I mean, just their point of view in general. I think that it flies in the face of better than everybody. on every issue have no ability to prove that they are, at that level. I mean, I see something like the flat earthers talking about areas that they're just so deeply when they're just talking about them, and yet they deny the most simple explanations. It almost seems like a psychological thing, not just a factual thing. With
Well, it's the same cognitive biases that everybody uses. They're just using more of them. So it's like Dunning-Kruger effect, where the less you know about a topic, the more you think you know, and confirmation bias, where you find facts that seem to support your position, and then you just latch onto them, and you always look for the things that confirm your belief and not try to disprove it. It's the same cognitive biases everybody uses, and they just haven't gotten to the point where they can get past those to the point where science is where, like, well, we do the opposite of that. We try to falsify our position rather than and look for things that disconfirm our position. And they haven't done that as well, which is why they believe in flat earth. Just like same with most religious people, it's the same kind of a thing, and most ideologies work that way.
it's it's just amazing to watch him. Like there was the Mark Sargent or somebody. He's like kind of one of the leaders in the flat Earth movement, and he was on National Geographic, and they took him to a lake, a group of other others, and they demonstrated with a laser the fact that it was across the lake, and and they just denied that that was not proof of even though it was right there in front of National Geographic laser showing, long distance, that the laser was clearly not hitting it at a level uh, place on this point that they'd put out.
Yep, I
mean,
actually like
people,
Mark Sargent.
I can see how people have a bias, but that's like beyond just a bias. And he's like telling everyone there, like he's really instructing them. He's like, nobody agrees with that's proof of a flat Earth, right? I mean, he's like telling all these people like they're followers and they have to listen to him. They don't really, he's like poisoning the well before they get to answer the question.
Well,
You
yeah,
know
it's
what I
the same
mean?
thing. There's actually a documentary done by, I think, Richard Dawkins and Michael Shermer and some other guys about like homeopathy and uh, dowsing, and they show people doing the exact same thing the flat earthers are doing. They say the exact same things word for word when their belief system is challenged. There's also astrology. They do all kinds of things. It's literally the exact same reasoning and word for word response. It's the same kinds of human biases in the brain that get you to those kinds of belief systems.
It almost seems to me like they have like a personality type defect.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because I think that all of the biases are pretty common in humanity in general. It's just that you have to learn to avoid them. You have to say, well, these kinds of thinking are the wrong kinds, and you have to identify them as the wrong kinds, and then say, okay, so what are the right kinds? And if you don't do that, well, then you're prone to adopt those kinds of ideologies because they're really common, like religious beliefs, and they're easy to justify if you're using that kind of reasoning.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, that's for sure. I don't know what the cause is, but it's definitely interesting that, I mean, just the psychology behind it, just the fact that you can believe that you know better than, like, with the flat earther, he knows better than all the cosmologists, all the astrophysicists. all of, it's just incredibly arrogant position. I personally, I just would never be that arrogant to think that I knew better than like the leading scientists, the guys that are, 4 or 5 times more intelligent than I am. It's just such an arrogant position to take.
I mean, I would say it's okay to think that you may know something the majority doesn't, but I think you have to acknowledge that the majority is more likely to be right. If you do that, then it's totally fine to have a different perspective. So, like, for example, my moral system, I think that my moral system is right and it's in the minority. Like, most people don't interpret morality in the same way. So, but I acknowledge that the majority has a position and there's reasons they have those positions which are in disagreement with mine. And so it's more likely or more reasonable to take their position purely on the fact that they have that evidence. And I just choose to like mine better. I think I like the reasons for mine, but I would acknowledge that it's a weaker position to hold in general. So as long as you take that kind of approach, I think it's fine. But if you think that you're right and obviously you're right and all of those great thinkers are just deluded or in some kind of a conspiracy, that's when it's kind of bullcrap. Like, no, definitely not.
I think it's fascinating to me to hear the explanation of the conspiracy too, because to me that's such an important part of their whole
worldview,
their whole way of thinking. Yeah, that the conspiracy, and the fact that it'd be so difficult to hold that sort of conspiracy because you have suppliers like for NASA like Boeing and all the employees that are building satellites and all of the other. It's immense the amount of conspiracy that would be necessary.
Yeah, the fact that all the government organizations are all working together to hide the fact that the world is flat, that no one can find a edge, and that all of the satellites and the International Space Station are all like fake in some ways. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and even all the suppliers, the people building equipment for NASA, because NASA doesn't build them, they subcontract out a lot of the work, or and all the independent companies like Jeff Bezos has formed and Elon Musk and
SpaceX,
all of the companies. I mean, it's just preposterous. It's just so ridiculous. It's hard to believe that people can hold to a position. It just seems indefensible to me. So, Tom, who do you think is giving you the most strongest and most accurate criticism that you've taken in, and you've changed your position because of it?
Randall Rouser, probably. I think he was probably the best. Stupid Horn Energy says I should play a horror game so you can see my emotions. I will do that. Actually, one of my favorite horror games is Dead Space. That series, I really like that series. That's a really good series. My favorite set of horror games. Dead Space 1 was amazing.
So what was it that Randall Rouser pointed out to you that you felt you were corrected on by him?
His position on fallibilism, which is the consensus in philosophy right now about knowledge, that you can have objective knowledge without being absolutely certain about it. Alien Isolation. I have not played Alien Isolation. I saw the demo. Yeah, Dead Space 2 was good too. I really liked it, but I think the first one was better. The not talking thing just really added a level to it. But when they tried to make the main character personal, it was it got less like scary. because it was like having someone there to talk to, and so it was more relatable. Just have this silence made a huge difference. What do I think about Josh Rasmussen's contingency argument? I think it's the same as all the other contingency arguments. I don't think it works. Contingency arguments are just, I mean, I think that in general, the contingency argument is probably the best argument for Christianity. There has to be some necessary thing. But when you try to add consciousness to it, it just doesn't work. Like there's no need for a conscious necessary thing. It's ad hoc. What properties of a necessary being do I accept? Well, it just has to be necessary and either eternal or all powerful, and that's it. Because being just means it exists. It doesn't actually mean it's conscious. So it's just anything that exists and either is eternal or all powerful is the basis of everything, and that's sufficient.
Do you feel like sometimes people are conflating like being with like an agent though?
Yeah.
And I feel like they try to smuggle that in.
Yeah, when the word being is usually interpreted to be like a person of some kind. It's not. It shouldn't be. Being in philosophy just means it exists. So a pencil is a being, even though it has no consciousness in philosophy.
Just shout at me if I don't hear it. I'm a bit distracted in the written and such a bad multitasker.
If they're asking questions in the written chat, let me know. Just because I'm kind of distracted by the gaming, so.
Yeah.
Pelican Super Tool. Super Tool, yeah. Pelican Super Tool. Where did you gain your knowledge about philosophy? Researching it on my own, videos, audited classes at universities, those kinds of things. To be or not to be? Sully. Ooh. Damn it. Anybody know if Atangelo is online? right. Can I prove that rape, murder, and bestiality are actually wrong in an ultimately meaningless and purposeless, godless world without moral truths? Yep. Well, murder and rape would definitely be because they're not consensual. Bestiality would be like alien sex. If it's consensual, it's not immoral. So the only reason sex with animals and aliens would be wrong is if they don't consent, and animals are like kids. They don't have the intellectual capability to consent. So that's why sex with animals is wrong. But if there was a Family Guy, like the dog, if the dog had a human level intellectual capability, then it wouldn't be wrong anymore.
I have a question, TJump.
Sure.
If you convince somebody, is that immoral or
Nope.
amoral or moral?
Amoral. People choose to believe something, then that's on them.
Right. So if you trick them, maybe even by accident, is that moral or amoral or immoral?
Amoral.
By convincing them.
So words, again, are just purely optional. If you choose to believe something or listen, that's totally up to you.
Okay, so in a perfect world, would everyone have to understand the consequences of their decision making?
Yes, so you would need to write it as a law into your worldview that when initially
Can't be
writing the
tricked,
world that you would
maybe.
know everything about it, and then you could limit your knowledge and then be tricked, but it would always be within the limitations of what you would already agree to in your world.
All right. Okay, thank you.
You're right, Sully. We don't technically choose to believe because they're determined by biology and other things, but it's kind of a compatibilist viewpoint. Oops, apparently I didn't save somebody. Like Dan Dennett's view, so we choose insofar as our neurology allows us to choose, and that is sufficient for us to have free will in the compatibilist sense, and that's good enough. You don't actually need the absolute libertarian free will. Pelican Super Toll, yes, there are. I'm a moral realist, so there are moral facts in my view. Damn it. Damn it. Can you prove that not getting consent is actually wrong in a godless world? Yes. So, again, that would be the definition of best is the best of all possible worlds. And if we give like an example, like if I give someone the option to choose an apple as opposed to forcing someone to choose an apple, it's obviously the case that forcing them to eat the apple is immoral, whereas giving them the choice is not immoral. So, I mean, that's sufficient to prove that it is more moral to give someone a choice rather than to give them consent rather than to force them to do something without consent. And there's detailed philosophical reasons for how that applies to intuition and moral progress. Ugh. You'll have to actually look at the detailed analysis of what moral progress and moral intuition are. That's how proof works in moral philosophy and ethics. Do I have 2 of those up? Yopal X, morality is a description of the best of all possible worlds in which all actions are consensual. So if you make someone do something without their consent, that's what immorality is. Sully, free will is just the... Oops. Free will is just the ability to do... Oops. The ability to do otherwise insofar as our brain allows. So just neurology, even if it's determined, is still free will in that sense, and we don't need anything more than that.
Just will,
What?
Whether it's free, it's another... But why? I don't see how voluntary is all that matters.
It's the core of what matters. If you look at all moral dilemmas and try and define, well, what is it that makes something moral or one moral action over the other, looking at all the different moral dilemmas in ethics and philosophy, the one fact, the one common feature is that you can just describe them all in the context of choice. And that solves all of the problems in all of the ethical problems. Is it moral to birth a baby?
That doesn't get around contradictions, though, in moral situations.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so...
What about the neo-Nazi who wants to kill...
A consumer wants to buy something from me, right? So if I deny them that product, I'm denying them their will, right?
No, because you own the property. So freedom of will only applies to yourself and your universe. It doesn't apply to other people. So you can't ever force anyone else to do something against their will. That would be a violation of the principle itself. There is no involuntary imposition of will.
But in the best of all possible worlds, that consumer should be able to get the thing they want, right?
Yes, they should. They have their own world, so they can just do it if they want. They can have their own product.
So in this situation, we have a consumer that wants to buy something and a seller that doesn't want to sell it, and one of them has to have their will imposed upon, right?
Nope. Again, so in your world, you can do whatever you want. The consumer can just generate whatever they want in that world, and the seller can just not give whatever they want in their world. But
right,
if you're in the same world, then...
I get that in a hypothetical world, that would be true, but how that is completely irrelevant to how the actual world works.
Right, because we're not in the best of all possible worlds. In our world, there are 2 immoral options, and you don't get to do a perfect option. So...
Now, do you think it's useful to hypothesize a best of all possible worlds when we don't know if such a world could exist, and B, it's so detached from our reality that it's like completely alien to our concept?
Yeah, using abstracts is extremely useful in philosophy and science. Like Einstein envisioned traveling at the speed of light, which is literally impossible for us to do, but we can use it as a guidepost to make inferences and analogies that are useful. So the fact that we can, it's impossible for us to draw a perfect triangle, but we can use the idea of a perfect triangle to get as close to possible in the world. So the same thing applies in the case of morality. So even if the perfect world is impossible, we can use that as a goal or a standard to try to determine what morality is or should be.
I mean, that doesn't speak to how ambitious the goal should be, right? Maybe don't you think that's a tad ambitious to imagine a world that only an omnipotent being could create in a contradictory?
Well, the level of ambition is irrelevant to the truth, so it doesn't make a difference. But I would say that it is actually technically possible for us to create those kinds of worlds. Like in a computer program, if we built an AI, that would be able to do it. Or if we got enough control over the laws of physics, that would be able to do it. It's not it would technically be physically possible for us to create this world potentially, but whether or not it was is irrelevant to its usefulness. Is the Calvinist God evil, or are we just?
I'm just doing on what you said, so I don't just word vomit. I want to think about that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Is the Calvinist God evil, or are we just puppets anyway? So it's not. Yeah, the Calvinist God would definitely be evil. The whole drowning babies thing is immoral.
We could definitely agree on that, TJump.
Is it moral to birth a baby? Yeah, it's amoral. It's not moral or immoral. I would say that forcing a being into a world that they had no consent in would be immoral, but that wasn't the parents didn't do that. Only nature did that. So there's not the parents' immorality, it's the immorality of nature. So it is technically immoral to force a baby to be born into the world without its consent, but it's not the parents that are doing that, it's the nature that's doing that.
It's so complicated, and you're not solving anything if you just assume everything is immoral that happens against
solving anything. The goal is just to give a description of the best of all possible worlds. It's not meant to like solve anything other than just giving us an ideal to strive for. It's not very complicated. It's pretty simple compared to pretty much any other moral system where you have a lot of complicated arithmetic you have to do to figure out what's right.
but it doesn't hold up to reality, as Rolf said.
It doesn't matter. Like again, you're confusing pragmatic application to what is ideal, and the goal is to answer the ideal, not the pragmatic application. Pragmatic application is irrelevant to what's ideal.
Okay. Yeah, we agree basically on moral realism, right? We only have a different approach how to establish it. How to really. You say it's volition, no forced, no opposing will, and I say it's rather something to do with harm.
So let's just try. So I get what you're saying about how we have this ideal standard that we hold it to, right? And we methodologically try to get closer to that standard, whether we can or not. That's all fine, right? My problem is, so when we do put this in the real world, we end up with these situations where we have to say, oh, one person's will is going to have to be imposed on, and we have to decide on the least imposition. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's things in the world where you're going to have to choose between two immoral actions in our world, and there's no moral option at that point. It's just the least immoral option.
Right. So here's where the issue arises. I think it's the same idea how we try to measure justice. How do we really measure, like, in numbers, an imposition and on will compared to another person, and then quantify that accurately and consistently? That seems like an issue to me.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue, but there's pretty obvious cases like killing someone would be more of an imposition than getting a paper cut. So there's harm and suffering and all kinds of ways to different measure it. Don't know of the correct way, but there are definitely obvious cases, and there's definitely a gray area.
Did someone say that your moral system wasn't useful? TJump?
They said it doesn't apply to pragmatic reality. Like there are certain things we have to do. We can't always do the moral action. We sometimes like if a buyer and a seller, someone wants to buy something and someone doesn't want to sell it, then it's that reality. When I describe it as being immoral, isn't the pragmatic or useful in that situation?
Sure, but I think you've said that your moral system have predictive power of how morality will develop as, let's say, technology develops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually agree with that. I don't know if the prediction. I have seen him say that. So like, it does have predictive power, right? Because if what he says holds, then specific things should happen. So that's actually true. Now the question is, will those things happen, right?
Yep. That is correct.
So basically, like, he's like Einstein waiting for the solar eclipse, kind of, I think.
Yep, pretty much.
I mean, I'm rooting for you, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, thanks, no
I think
problem.
I think a lot of people will stop eating real meat from animals when we can make it ourselves in labs.
Oh yeah, for sure. Damn it, no.
So just to put my cards on the table, I hold to a quasi-realist perspective.
And what is that?
What it means is that morals are not truth acts, but they are structured in propositional manners using one fact about the at least one fact about the world and several subjective assessments. So the propositions are quasi-real in that they are somewhat based on truth.
Yeah, like labels like Theseus' ship. Theseus' ship doesn't exist, but it's quasi-real, whereas it describes some properties of a ship, and then we label it as being Theseus's.
Yeah, kind of. The idea is that like you have to change the ship plank by plank, and that's how you get into moral progress from a quasi-realist perspective. You can't change the whole. That's tangential to quasi-realism. It's mostly just a statement about the propositions, and it can be extrapolated into other types of propositions as well. This accounts for the lack of universality in morals because it basically states that we all use similar facts about the world, but there is an array of assessments we could make, which is sorry if that.
Yeah, no problem.
So TJump, if you were to form a normative ethical structure based off of your best of all possible worlds semantics, would what would that look like? Would it look like secular humanism, utilitarianism? Like what's the closest thing you?
Yeah, probably something like that. I would go with Robert Nozick's system. I forget exactly what it was called, but essentially, uh, it's essentially where every society is voluntary, where you can voluntarily choose to enter or leave a society. And the system.
Presumably, assuming that we're not like globalized.
Mike Max 87 said, I don't accept your definition of moral and immoral. Well, my definition is meant to be objective, so it doesn't matter whether you accept it or not. It's true regardless of whether you accept it. That's the idea.
That's the distinction between ethical and moral.
I don't actually think there is a distinction between ethical and moral. In philosophy, they're synonymous terms.
In general philosophy, yes. In law, not.
Well, there's a colloquial concept of ethics, right? Like some people consider that to be like formal morals, like when you're in like a environment, but it's not the same word, I don't think.
I'm not sure.
Would you give us a summary of? Sorry, would you give us a summary of, I guess, legal ethic and moral?
Who are you asking?
I think I'm asking Theo.
Well, in law, it's ethic is the very basic rules, like the golden framework of democratic rights. You cannot vote to abandon the state, to abandon some people, whatever is in violation with human rights, you cannot vote. So that's the ethical boundary you have. But then you have different morals underneath it. Some think you should be able to marry women and men. and others think no marriage should be only between man and woman. That would be a distinct moral, which there is no clear objective answer to it. Ethically, you just have to be unbiased and respect every nature, every human nature the same.
Yeah, you're kind of like talking about moral axioms, I think. So like, as long as you say that word and the two people talking about it understand it, that's what matters, right?
Yeah, but it matters if we're speaking about a general unbiased morality or a distinct socio-cultural morality.
I would just call those both subsets of morality. But yeah, you could call one
Full
ethic.
subsets.
Right, it's like if you have a ball, a red ball or a blue ball would both be subsets of.
Yeah, that's the general philosophical way to look at it. Ethics and morals are kind of both constructs.
Yeah, I don't think that's too contentious. I would just caution that, like, if you're in a discussion with somebody and they have trouble drawing that semantic distinction, it's better to just have them understand you as opposed to die on the hill of the language, right?
Yeah, but it's an important distinction you need to make, because that's what I'm pointing at. Ethics can be unbiased, following what we assume to be the ideal justice. Morals, on the other hand, are always some kind of subjectively linked to our culture, to our own personal beliefs. Laws shouldn't be moral, laws should be ethical.
Oh, but okay, so by what you just said, though, doesn't that mean that there should be some universal morals that everybody holds to?
Not that everybody holds to, but that everybody can get to. Everybody can discover them, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
That was my point with empirical science, geology of Europe and Africa, all the sciences, they have a standard which is worldwide the same, you know. It's the methodology of empirical science. If you apply that to ethics, you also have to say, well, actually, we have to give everybody the same right. We can't oppose some superiority or whatever for some people. That would be ethical. And it's empirical and pragmatic, and you can't prove it's existing in the universe without consciousness, of course.
Yeah, I always see that move. So, like, when people say objective morality, sometimes I feel like they mean intrinsic morality, and I like to, because those are two completely different ideas. So, when anyone here says objective morality, does anybody actually mean that there's like a moral standard apart from the mind, apart from thinking agents?
Yeah, the natural law thinks that. Also, Max thinks that. It's also natural law if you say the Bible is the absolute morality. But it's not really objective, it's defined by this religion. And secular natural law just deals with worldly stuff, worldly arguments.
Yeah, well, I think that
basically TJump, you are also worldly secular with your volition. Don't impose anything on somebody.
Well, the system is secular. It doesn't have anything to do with a god, that's for sure.
Yeah. You deal with the problem of the world. In secular natural law, you can't argue from religious doctrine, you know. You can't say, but this text says. You can only bring forth worldly arguments.
Well, it's not about worldly, it's about existential. So it has to have something to do with existence. And, like, what actually involves, what are the facts of reality as opposed to description of an opinion of a god or something.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's secularum is the world. Politics is also dealing with the things in the world. That's why politics should be secular from religious beliefs. We all have different religious beliefs. We can't impose them on anybody else. We had to find that out in Europe 30 years. And that's what Islam is lacking, in my opinion, the Reformation, secularism, human.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you can have a secular Islam, you know. If it's like you say, voluntary to obey Sharia law, you don't have to do any of the things the Quran says, but it's voluntary, then it's totally fine, then it's a secular religion. Problem is if you enforce your rules on somebody else, right?
Yeah, so that's one thing. Like when we're talking about voluntary or involuntary impositions of will, right? Don't you need free will for that, or am I wrong there?
Well, either like the not the libertarian free will, just a compatibilist version of free will. So, insofar as your brain allows it, is sufficient. You don't actually need the libertarian free will.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think you only need will.
Yeah,
doesn't have to be free, you know. If you violate my will, it doesn't matter if it's my free will or it's my will by chemistry. You're just violating my will. Put me in jail.
But doesn't possible world semantics, like what's the point of it in a deterministic world? If there was only one kind of world and you were only going to make one kind of choice, what is it to even say that you imposed on somebody's choice? I mean, you're talking about the brain chemistry, right? So is it like you did something to their brain?
No,
somehow?
it's like if I want a cookie and you take away my cookie, you've imposed on my will. It doesn't matter why I want the cookie. Like if I freely chose
Okay,
to
so
want
your
the cookie,
your brain emitted a chemical that had cookie regret, basically.
right? So I had the will that I wanted the cookie. And that why I had that will is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if it's free will or determined will or biochemical or spiritual. It makes no difference. All that matters is that is my will, and violating that will is what is immoral.
Alright.
And then you can persuade him to give him the cookie or don't eat the cookie. And you could dishonestly manipulate him. Make him think the cookie's poisoned.
Right. Those will be fine. You just can't take the cookie away by force.
I don't think it's fine if I would manipulate you dishonestly into thinking the cookie is poisoned.
I think I touched on that topic 50 minutes ago or something.
Well, it's a really good point though, because like if the person does not know that their will was imposed upon, well, was it immoral, right? Like let's say it's an imposition of will to kill my dog. I want my dog alive, but let's say the dog gets killed when I'm not looking, and for whatever reason I don't find out, right? Like was it moral?
Well,
to kill my dog?
I mean, the dog has a will that it wants to live, so killing the dog is immoral on its own. But if
he's suffering,
yeah, maybe that's a bad example. Let's say it's a pizza and someone eats it.
Yeah, if it's your pizza, it's still immoral because you had the will to eat the pizza and they took it away from you, even regardless of whether or not you're aware of it.
But it's fat. It's not sane. It's not healthy for you.
Doesn't matter. Will is not about health.
Amen.
Yeah, but will is not a good criterion, I would say. Harm is much better, and also has to be case by case evaluated. I mean, smoking harms myself. Should I be prohibited to smoke to harm myself? I don't think so. I think it should be free will or my will granted in this sense. But
Right.
it's always
But that's where the harm thing comes in.
evaluating security and liberty, right?
Well, that's why I think that harm is irrelevant.
And
'Cause
I
it's like, it
agree.
doesn't matter. If you want to harm yourself, go for it. You should have the right to do that. To any degree, if you want to, like, suicide is
Yourself.
totally fine. I think that suicide is not immoral. I think it would be immoral to force someone not to kill themselves if they wanted to.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think any moral system does very well if it makes self-harm immoral. I think that just is not a good idea.
Yeah.
If it's totally forbidding it, I can see. But if it's really harmful, like you risk the entire population to die, then I would say self-preservation of the society should go before individual.
I would totally disagree there because you could go something like, imagine if the population just as a whole just decided not to reproduce as much to be able to support the population, which is like what's happening in Japan, where they're just not creating enough children in order to sustain the system, but saying that, well, because that is going to risk the entire population, therefore we can force women to have lots of kids. That would be horribly immoral. That wouldn't be justified in any way.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
So that's why I think that
if one nation just hasn't got enough children, that's no justification to create children early.
Well, I would say
taking
even if
sperm
the
and eggs.
entire planet kind of was going that way and all humans were just not reproducing as much and were going to die out eventually, it would still be immoral to force women to have children to save humanity.
So I think the distinction here, right, is in the example Theo gave. There's no person hurting another person. It's a bunch of people just hurting themselves, and it results in the net loss of humanity. As opposed to, like, if I jump off a building and land on somebody, I actually directly hurt somebody by killing myself, right? It wasn't just a bunch of us jumped off a building together.
Right.
I think that's the distinction.
That would be immoral, just like the rock falling on you because you hampered somebody else. Somebody else's will in the act of killing yourself. So the act of killing yourself isn't immoral. It's the fact that you fell on somebody, and that is moral. Just like if a rock fell on somebody, that would also be immoral.
What about if I say, let's all go to Area 51 and be shot by the military? They don't let us in. Is that immoral, or is that...
Well, I'd say that...
I think that's creating a danger.
In the best of all possible worlds, you should be able to go wherever you want in your world. But we don't live in that, so that's one of those. What's the least immoral action there? Does the military have a right to protect its property? And well, the answer is sort of yes, for pragmatic reasons. It's not moral. It's still immoral for them to kill you for any reason, but it's kind of one of those, like, what's the less immoral of the two options in that case?
And my Facebook post would be immoral. To call to disobey the military in Area 50.
Well, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's immoral to call to disobey anybody. I don't think any words are technically immoral no matter what. So.
Well, I'm going to jump off. Thanks for the chat, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rolf. Catch you later. He also made some great points out. Yeah, I think we're really close, but we just don't have the same ethical realism, or moral realism.
Sure.
But I wanted to get you a bit to my side that harm is more important. Let's not say about, let's say the sick dog. Your dog is suffering, but you love your dog and you don't want to lose him. There you have two opposing.
Well, no.
Strong feelings.
In that case, it would be the dog's will, not yours, that matters. So if the dog is suffering and the dog wants to live, it's immoral to kill it. If the dog is not suffering and the dog wants to die, it's immoral to kill it. So, or use a person for an example. If a person is suffering and does not want to die, then you should not kill them. If a person is not suffering but does want to die, then you should help them to end their life.
Yeah. So there it's the least immoral thing is to don't go after your will to have him live, but to look for his wealth.
Well, yeah, it would
for
be
his,
immoral for you to impose your will on him, the dog or the person. That would be immoral. The moral thing to do is to accommodate their will. What is the will of the person or the dog?
Then I would say that's harm over will, because your will is not as important as the harm the dog has, the suffering.
Well, no. Again,
you know what I mean?
You have to do it from the perspective of one person. So the dog, there could be some amount of suffering. If the dog lives, it's going to go through a great amount of harm. But the dog
to die, you directly have to go to their choice and help them to die.
Well, you don't have to. It would be moral to help them to die if they want to die, but you don't have to do it.
I think there it's tricky. You shouldn't help the first person to suicide you see. You should try to help him get to a less suffering life view perspective.
Well, sure, but that should be their decision, not yours.
I don't think.
No, that's gonna be my decision. I'm gonna pull you off the border if I can, just to talk to you before you jump.
Right, but it's up to them. Like they get to decide what is more valuable, a life of less suffering or not living, and you don't get to make that choice for them. They have to make that choice. It would be immoral for you to force them to live.
Yeah, in the long run. But I just pulled them off the border of the building, Then I would have imposed my will on them.
Yep, that's immoral.
For them to live. That would be immoral for you, and I should not have done.
Correct. Like if they actually genuinely want to die and you physically stop them, that's immoral. Like they have the right to make the decision about their life, and you imposing on that decision and stopping them is immoral. So it would be moral to go up and say, is there something I can do to help you out in life? And if there is something I can do to make your life less painful, then I will do it. That would be moral. But if you're physically stopping them from killing themselves, that may just end up causing them more suffering. And they have the right to make that choice, not you.
Just to win some time. I just pulled you off the border and to discuss with you, hey, let's talk about it. Can't we find anything?
You can't do that. The moral thing to do is to say, hey, is there anything I can do to help you in life? That's the moral thing to do. It's never moral to force them to stop.
Let's say he's jumping. You have no time to... But you would have time to pull him back.
This though, the original. I could be wrong though.
Sorry?
I think you're confusing something. I don't think TJump is saying you should or you shouldn't. I think it just says it is or it isn't. In our world, I'm sure in some situations it's justified to do the immoral thing.
Yep, that's true. There's justified immoral actions where you have to choose to do the least immoral thing. So in our world, because there are limitations, you have to choose to do one action which may be less immoral than the other action. But in the best of all possible ways, you shouldn't. It's just the moral thing.
And if I physically interfere, against somebody's will, it's always...
Yes, but
it's always immoral.
Justified.
That's crazy.
But it can be
if I see Hitler killing the Jews and I would interfere, it's also against his will.
Yep, that's still immoral.
But it's moral.
Killing baby Hitler is still immoral. So anytime you impose on a will, it's immoral.
Baby Hitler. I'm not saying about baby Hitler.
It doesn't make a difference. So anytime you impose on a will, it's immoral.
Of course.
So
no.
So the question is,
if I impose my will on somebody who imposes his will on others,
it's still immoral.
It can be the least immoral.
It might be justified that way.
Yeah, it would be justified, but it's still immoral. So like if you have to kill one person to save 1,000, because if you don't kill that one person, they're going to kill 1,000. It's still immoral to kill the one person. It's justified because
you're so hardcore about. I don't agree
the original. There. I think this is where I think you might be confused. I could be wrong about that too, but I think this is why TJump is so find it so important to differentiate between is and ought in morality, because I don't think his morality got any oughts. It's just is and isn't. And if you're saying that something like you should do something makes it immoral or moral. If the oath is a part of your morality, then I think you're talking past each other, maybe just a little bit.
Now both our moralities is TJump also is a moral right. Don't wanna put any words in somebody. You're a moral realist, right, TJump? You
Yes.
think the ideal world is everybody's volition. And
Yes,
that's our goal.
I'm
That's
moral
where we
realist,
measure.
so I believe that there are true moral facts, but there are no oughts in those that are required. It's just is statements. So morality is a description of the best of all possible worlds. The best of all possible worlds is this. That's a moral fact. So that's moral realism.
Your best world is not a moral fact to everybody. And also not empirical.
A fact is something true regardless of what anybody thinks. So that's the point, is that it's a moral fact. It's an objective fact that this is the case, regardless of what anybody else thinks.
No, but I just gave you the thing. There is harm and there is will. Sometimes
right, and
the
harm is irrelevant. So harm is always irrelevant. It's only the will that matters. The harm is irrelevant, 100%, no matter what, always.
In your for me, it's more important that you don't harm too much, not that you're following your.
Right, and that's just objectively wrong. That's the position. What's my take on David Bentar's asymmetry argument? It doesn't work. Like, the asymmetry argument presupposes that there is no symmetry between pain and pleasure, where it assumes that, like, pain existing regardless of whether or not there's someone to feel it is bad, whereas pleasure existing regardless of whether or not there's someone to feel it is amoral. So I mean, it's just saying that pain as a concept is bad, whereas pleasure as a concept is amoral or not good, and so therefore we should just prioritize not pain. But it makes no sense. I mean, there's no comparison there. It's just pain is bad and pleasure is good, or pain is not good and pleasure is not good. They're equivalent sides of the same coin. You can't just assume they're asymmetrical in some way, because there's nothing about them to be asymmetrical. Is it immoral to persuade another moral? Is it immoral to persuade another moral desires? I don't know what that means. It's not immoral to persuade people. You can persuade people to do whatever they want, and they can choose to accept that or not. God damn it. Yeah, if I just want to yeet myself, I don't know if that's moral or not, because I don't know what to yeet means. Is it a verb? Is it an adverb?
I think that's the point of the verb.
To yeet or not to yeet? That is the question. How do I feel about Neil deGrasse Tyson's 3 truths? Personal, scientific, and political. Well, political is just personal, so there's no difference there. Those are the same thing. But so I would say there are 3 kinds of knowledge, and I'd go with Isaac Asimov's version, where there's the subjective as in personal, there's the scientific, which is like verifiable, and there's the absolute truth, which is the fundamental truth of reality, which is has nothing to do with science. Discord says my invitation has expired. It shouldn't have. Did you check the link? I'll check it right now. Should be, or maybe you did you type it in the New incognito window. This still says it works for me. Like if you type it in the N2EQP4H, I think you have to do capital Q for it to work. But yeah, it still says it works for me.
Do you want me to copy a permanent link for you?
Well, the one in my description should be a permanent link. The one in the so could you try it and make sure it's working, because it should be a permanent link.
All right, so that's going to be on your YouTube channel, right? And the
Yeah, on my YouTube channel or my Twitch or anything, it's in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and it's also in the description. There's a link in the description you should be able to click on.
yeah. The link works, but if you want me to post a new one for these people in the live chat, I can.
Yeah, go for it for sure. Like so, okay, as long as it's still working, that's good. So, because yeah, somebody in the chat said that it was not working, that it expired. Discord says your invitation has expired. So, just wanted to make sure it still worked. But yeah, go ahead and post a new one for anybody who wants it.
There, I posted it on TJump's YouTube channel on the live chat 3 times, so
Thanks.
can't miss it.
Thank you very much.
That's right, TJ. You said you shouldn't keep somebody physically from jumping.
No, he didn't. He said that it would be immoral.
It would be
He
immoral.
might say it would have also been justified.
So should I or should I not?
In our world,
I
yes,
think
you
you
should.
should
In the
stop
best of all
someone.
possible worlds, you should not.
Especially if you know that this person.
That's so illusion.
I
I think especially if you know
what's
this person is
the
not in a
best
good mental state.
I mean, in the best world, I should not stop somebody from killing himself, but in the real world.
Yes.
Yes, that's because in our world there are limitations that prevent us from always being perfectly rational. But if there's a perfectly rational person in the best of all possible worlds, then it would always be immoral to stop them, because they have the right to make the decision for themselves.
They do, but I think you don't judge in every situation. I would like to speak with him if there is no option to improve his life, get away from suffering before he decides to kill himself. If I just see somebody jumping off a roof, I would physically, and then we talk a bit, and if you try it 3 times, then the fourth time we have to talk about it first. That's my ethics. I think your will isn't the most important. The long-term sustainability is pretty important. Of course, everybody's free to do.
I don't think anyone disagrees, but I think in the perfect world he would be perfectly rational, something like that. I think I could be wrong about this too.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
I think TJump said something about raising children, you know, before they mature, more things are justified. You know, they cannot decide everything for themselves.
That's what I also say. In the real world, not only in the possible best of all worlds.
Right, but with technology, you know, it would be more and more immoral, even in our world, and it would be a better fit with the objective morality. I think that's the argument, anyways.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, he can keep the same morality and just switch to harm and not
Well, no,
will.
harm always fails. Harm is 100% always wrong, doesn't make a difference. Will always supersedes harm.
I just made the example. If you want to kill yourself, you might be in a position.
Right, and I completely
of a
refuted
bad-
that. Again, it's always immoral to stop someone from killing themselves. It's always immoral. So you always prioritize the will over the harm.
I actually got a cool experiment about this. I cannot remember who did it, but I think they had like a self-harm experiment where you tell someone, like they have like a little shock machine. You get like a little electrical shock just touching a button, and they tell you, "I'll pay you $5 if you just touch this." You know, you'll get electrocuted a little bit, so it will hurt, but you'll get $5. And I said, nah, they don't want to. And I think maybe they tried more money and they still refused. But then they leave them in the room just to wait for like 15 minutes. And when they get bored enough, they touch it just because it's worse to be bored, you know?
Yeah.
And then they do it by their free will and they don't even get paid. I just find that funny.
But that was a psychological experiment to test boredom versus suffering.
Exactly.
If you would prefer a little suffering to boredom, and you do, so you even prefer a bit suffering to. But I'm speaking of affection. You know, different mental states. You are not having the same opinion as others. If you're depressed, you are suicidal. You think negatively and want to end yourself. But that doesn't mean there is no hope for you.
Again,
this improve and
that only applies to the pragmatic world. In the best of all possible worlds, that doesn't apply.
Yeah, okay. I'm just speaking about the real world, and I don't know what is this possible world you are creating that can't exist and isn't the same rules as real world. I don't see the use of it.
I think I touched on it earlier with my example of killing animals for food. If we can avoid it, we will. I think that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that's the same
can
thing.
Avoid the harm.
That's the same thing with the suicide, though. Is that if we're in the best of all possible worlds and everyone is perfectly rational and there is no depression and someone wants to kill themselves just because that's their choice, then it's immoral to stop them. It would be immoral to physically stop them from killing themselves because they are perfectly rational.
I like what Chris said. He wouldn't be suicidal in the perfect world of yours. It's irrational to suicide.
I don't think I said that.
I
said he would be perfectly irrational, I think.
Perfectly irrational.
Irrational. Perfectly irrational. So
perfectly rational to kill him.
Yeah.
In the perfect world, where nothing happens.
How
do you come to the desire to end your life if nothing is? I don't think you can have a suicidal candidate in a perfectly willful world. You know,
well, then
it's really like the is and ought problem. It's just a function. It doesn't hold any.
Maybe, but I'm not sure if you demonstrated that.
Well, I ask you, how are you suicidal in a world where your will is completely fulfilled?
Well, no. So that's not how it works. It's like, again, you can choose or will lots of things. Like you can choose to live in a very difficult world if you want to. So it's not like your will is completely fulfilled. You can just choose to will something, and like if you restrict your will, and one of the things you will is to restrict your will, that's a possibility too. Like it's not you get everything you want kind of a world. That's not what it means. It's just you have the option
You
to design
said
your
in
own
the
world.
perfect world, there happens no accident. Nobody gets killed by a stone from a mountain.
You don't even die by aging, and if we can solve age death in this world, we
If you
would.
don't want to. Maybe you
Well,
want to age and die.
Yes, exactly. So you can choose
Well,
to live in a world where you age if you want to. That's one of the options. You can choose to live in a world with suffering if you want to. That's one of the options. You can choose to kill yourself if you want to. That's one of the options. So it's not like everyone is everything. It's just you just get to choose the properties of the world in which you live.
Yeah, but how do I say it? A suicidal state is a suffering negative state, and that only occurs if
No.
you're not happy and
No.
if your will isn't full.
No. So there's lots of
How
ways
does
that
that
can
come
cause.
about?
There's lots of ways that can cause a suicidal state. Like you could be a scientist and want to know what happens if you die, and just choose to kill yourself, just as a scientific experiment. It's not necessarily a depression state. So it's
Never heard of any scientific.
actually it's pretty common for scientists to wonder what's after death, and many have actually stories of people wanting to know what after die. So.
But they know they can only make once the experiment, and they likely will not come to the analytics of it. No reason.
But again, that's
if your
irrelevant.
senses.
It's irrelevant to the point. So people can choose to want to kill themselves.
No, it's not irrelevant to scientists.
Yes, it
only
is.
Make experiments you can verify.
No, that doesn't make a difference. So again, if you want to know what happens after you die, and you could choose to kill yourself, just for that curiosity, it's not necessarily because you're depressed. Oops. So you don't need to be depressed to want to kill yourself.
You can't get choice. It would be irrational to assume you know the result of killing.
That's again the only point here is that you don't need to be depressed to want to kill yourself. You can choose other reasons for that as well. That's the only point there.
That's not the case, and you haven't made.
I've already proved that. That's already been demonstrated.
Suicidal is a pathological, psychological.
I've already disproven that. No.
I think you are either arguing from definition or incredulity.
No, I'm arguing from empirical science. That's what gets under the table here.
You are denying that Tom has any examples that are counter.
I just told you suicidal behavior is psychopathological.
You are denying that there are no counterexamples. If you have a terminal patient. Yes, a counterexample, like if you have a terminal patient who wishes to stop having pain.
No, I'm not dismissing that people have suffering and are suicides. That's still pathological. That's sick. You're not.
You said
it's not natural to want to suicide.
I'm describing.
Yeah, it's also pathological to have cancer. It's not natural. Nobody wants by his nature.
Now you
just have to stay to empirical science, and there is no is-ought problem or anything else. It's just a matter of details. What is ethical? Do we force feed and hunger strike a prisoner, or do we let him his will to die? That's an empirical legal question. Ethical.
McGhostlevin. In the real world, doesn't your morality inevitably lead to transhumanism, voluntary matrix world, Yes, essentially, yes. The goal is to move closer to the best of all possible worlds, which would be like something like you could do it in the Matrix, and that would be if you voluntarily chose to go into it, you could move closer to that world. So yeah, it would necessarily be transhumanism where we aren't limited by the human limitations that we have. Stupid Horn Energy. I think he is. I don't think he. I think his perspective is just more specifically centered around the pragmatic worldview, and so he doesn't understand that you could potentially want to kill yourself for reasons that are not pathological. You just be curious about what's afterlife, and that could be a reason.
It's a reason of interest for me as well, but it would never justify killing.
If you
It
wanted,
would
that
be
justifies
completely.
it. Again, it has
It would
nothing
be
to do.
completely irrational to end my life to find out how it's.
No, that's
what is
it's
after.
irrelevant. The choice is up to the person. So if you want to do it to find out, you have the right to do it. Rationality is irrelevant. It's justified purely by the fact that you will to do it.
I'm never arguing against the right to end. I just say I would prevent somebody else on the first. But I would also argue for the right to end his own life. I'm completely agreeing. But there's affection, you know, you're not always in the best mood to decide if you should kill yourself.
In this world.
In this world, exactly.
And there is no natural, sane state that you want.
I also think that I could be wrong about this as well, because I think I'm talking about someone else's moral views. But this perfect world could be this one, you know? If you choose to live in this world where you can get depressed, you can for sure suicide from depression. Like the perfect world does
the
not.
The real world is your perfect world.
Yeah, I don't think it excludes this, but it have to be free will, you know, or it will have to be your will to be in this world.
Oh yeah. If we were in the perfect world, we could choose to live in a world exactly like this one if we wanted to, and that's an option.
But forcing you to be in this world against your will is immoral.
Right.
I heard you move the goalpost away from sane and then right back.
What?
Oh, I'm fine with.
Whoa. Right, you're
in my
ruling out all
all
suicidal reasons that are sane, like a terminal patient.
Well, he has a real pathological suffering.
That's not a sanity question.
That's yes, actually, pathologic means not. That means
no, it
disease.
means ill.
Yeah, ill is the contrary to sane. Health.
No, sane does not mean unhealthy. Sane
all right, we ask a doctor, and then you come back and. I studied psychology and I studied law, and I can tell you psychopathologic is not sane, is not healthy.
Are you
Is
suggesting that a terminal cancer patient is not?
Yes, he is physical ill with cancer, and that for suffering even mentally, if yes. Do you disagree with?
Yes, but I'll accept your definition for the purpose of this discussion. What would you call the distinction of physically ill without any mental illness other than the suffering of the physical illness? Do you have a word for?
Sorry?
You've redefined sane to include all physical illness. So now I want a word for physical illness with no apparent mental illness.
No,
Yes,
I clearly
you did.
said he has a physical illness, and he can have a psychological illness, pathological. He's physically and psychologically pathological. If you're having cancer and are depressed and suicidal. Or
Do you deny that a person could be terminal and choose to end their life without being mentally ill?
No, not the way psychology defines mental. Suffering is mental ill. If you're suffering, you're mentally ill.
So
If you don't suffer, you're happy and not suicidal.
but if you
That's
but if you are a bipolar and you're only or if you're only experiencing bipolar, like let's say like you only experience the highs of being happy all the time, if you only have endorphins released in your brain, are you mentally ill then?
Yeah, of course.
But you're happy, so you can't not be.
Yeah, you're not negatively suffering during your up phases
Yeah.
of bipolarism. But there is also the
Right,
other
but if you
side where
don't
you
but
are.
if you don't experience any downsides, if you're like basically just on drugs all the time and because of the enabling drugs, they enable the happy feeling, then wouldn't you always be in a mentally sane state of being? Thanks in part because of the drugs, right? I think
If you're on a balanced medical treatment and you don't feel suffering as a bipolar patient, yeah, then you have managed your mental illness.
yeah,
Then
but
you're
like
not suffering, then you're not ill.
I'm saying if you're like on cocaine or something, in that to that effect, if you're like constantly happy and you can get the drugs all the time and you're happy, then that gives you like the mental happiness, right? And that's not, and you're like,
Well, there's other psychological conditions like addiction, can be a happy cocaine.
right, right. But I think that you can be, I think that pathological is the absence of adhering to a logic, right? Or trying to reason, like, or, right. And I think
So
that
pathologic means
I think you've included that into saying that somebody is sane or not, right? And
I
that's not
include
doing it.
empathy, consideration, and everything into rationality. A
Yeah.
rational, sane person is empathetic, happy, and wants to. If
Well,
you're not happy, don't want to live, or want to kill other people, you have a psychological disorder. You're psychopathological. So that fixes all the
well,
problems.
I think if you have contradictionary logics, then you would be pathological, not inherent. Like just because you want one thing doesn't make you insane. It makes you sure uncouth and hard to deal with, but probably not completely insane.
There's always a matter of degree and
Yeah.
different types of illnesses, sure. I would say there's nobody perfectly healthy. Nobody is never suffering.
Mm.
That's what I said also with the accidents. Accidents happen, shit happens, diseases happen, genetically diseases. And there's even, as you say, a natural psychopathological variation. Some people
Yeah.
are pedophiles, some people are psychopath, some people are, don't know. There's a lot of variation. But the behavior is important, that we don't harm each other, not what we think. That's ethical and not.
Yeah.
You allow everything to be, everybody to be his natural way. He just shouldn't harm others or himself too badly. And the himself is questionable. I also would say that you have the right to end.
Yeah. But
But it's
pragmatically, would
difficult.
you actually be? Pragmatically, would you actually like that? I don't think you would. pragmatically, you wouldn't like people to kill themselves, even though they want it in the situation.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, so
Sometimes you're suicidal, but you don't have the guts to try it,
no,
yeah?
sometimes you have the guts.
Or you don't want.
Right, but if you have the guts to decide it, but it's like, if it could be considered something, a fleeting experience that you're suicidal in this moment, you would instead opt for rehabilitation over, right? So even if you have this drive and people want to die, then you're not saying let's empathize with them and let them die. You would instead pragmatically say let's try to rehabilitate them, right? So
Well, I had a friend who suicided. I couldn't believe it. He was trying a first time and then in therapy, but he never opened up. You know, we didn't really speak about really the suffering and if he wants and how much. And then his real second suicide was a surprise. And I wished I could have talked to him before, and I wished he came to me and said, "Hey, I'm gonna end it now. Therapy doesn't work. I'm still suffering." But often people don't confront this way.
yeah, but he wanted to die, and you're saying no, he doesn't get to
Yeah.
die because that hurts my feelings.
No, because I think there is a hope that he will be happy again. I don't think he's terminal depressed or really rationally accepting that he wants to
But
die.
if it's something he wants, then why inhibit it?
Because it's psychopathological, as I said, in a sane condition,
right, but
you don't want to kill yourself.
But everyone's a little bit insane to some degrees, and we have some things that we
Yeah. But not everybody wants to kill himself. Not everybody's that tough in the situation.
right.
That's really
But
a
you
high
said,
suffering.
but you also like earlier said that that's something we should let people come to their own conclusions about.
Yeah, over a long time. So he would have to talk to me like 5 hours several times over a year. And then after a year, I would have said, okay, you know, we tried everything. I also have no idea how to make your life better. I help you to suicide. Then I can say we tried everything and he's suffering and he doesn't want to keep struggling. But suicide is giving up your hopes on life, you know. You have to be clear about that. We don't know about an afterlife. If you end your life, that's giving up this life.
Yeah, of course.
So I think that should be the very ultima ratio, as you said, in terminal illness case. But everybody's suicidal or depressed sometimes. I don't think we should definitely don't like it.
Some
All right,
people
guys.
find it
I gotta
scary.
go. I got an appointment to admit to. It was really great talking to you guys. I'll talk to you later.
I get them.
Awesome talk, yeah. Thanks, guys. I hope I haven't been too opinionated or anything.
All right.
I enjoyed it.
I want to ask
Just
anybody.
opinionated enough. Keep
Oh,
it
wait,
interesting.
what did you want to ask, real quick?
Well, I mean, did you? I wrote a I added you yesterday, or yeah, yesterday night for me, and I asked you a question about how you deal with people claiming that your objective moral view is subjective, and like how like the only true definitive statements we can make about the world in an objective sense is that you are thinking, right? And that's the only one statement you can make for yourself.
Yeah, for
right?
absolute truth.
Yeah.
I can argue
like,
against even that.
And yeah, and some people just say that, well, that's just an illusion. It's probably just an emergent thing. So why should we even care about it or something? But maybe I didn't ask it in a straightforward question, but I don't know how to put it to words.
Well, so I'm arguing that morality is kind of like a scientific kind of a thing. So we can't prove it's absolutely objectively true in the same way that I think, therefore I am is objectively true. It's just it can make predictions, and if those predictions come true, we can say that certain models are more true than other models.
Right.
So that's how I would respond.
Right. Using a set of principles, these that we then we use it as a models through these principles, and like the most universal, the most applicable to every scenario to deal with with consciousness is to have it based around choice.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think I have a lot of problem like getting
I
people
think
to understand that point of view, because it's, for me, it takes a long time to set up the whole like set up the model for people, so people, like, I don't know, people doubt me when I try to get into it.
I think it's objective because it's independent of human opinions as well.
Yeah, so it would be like scientifically kind of
Well,
objective would be the goal.
Even
Or
if everyone disagrees with the morality, it could still be objectively
yeah, like if
correct.
everyone disagreed that triangles have 3 sides, they'd just be wrong.
right.
So
But
the
like,
idea is
wouldn't
that
that
morality is
make
an
all
abstract description of the best of all possible worlds, kind of like a triangle is or the idea of a perfect triangle is a description of something that has 3 perfectly straight lines. So even if they disagree, they'd just be wrong.
That's
right?
what makes it objective.
But like, what if triangles aren't even a thing?
Well, I mean, triangles
Right.
are just by definition. That's just what it means. So it's not saying
Yeah.
they don't actually need to exist for them to be a
Yeah.
3-sided object.
I mean, yeah, it's like something we can all agree on, that well, triangles exist to us unanimously, and if you have like all the logical reasoning skills of a normal human being, we could come to this conclusion through our through our common consensus. Is that like kind of what?
Well, no, because mathematical objects are true independent of what we think about them. They're descriptions of reality. So 1 + 1 = 2 is true because it corresponds to reality. You don't get an opinion on it. It doesn't matter if we agree on it. And triangles are the same thing. Triangles are a mathematical object. So it doesn't matter if people agree on the object. It's true regardless.
Somebody told me, or this was kind of tangential to me wanting to talk about this with some other person, and they were saying, well, prove to me a mathematical fact, right? That is kind of, and I was like, I don't really understand the question at all. Like a mathematical fact in a sense that it exists in the universe or something. And I think he was trying to illustrate that, well, mathematical concepts are just like a construct in and of itself that we've socially
Right. So
engineered.
here would be my response is that we can construct like different versions of math, like 1 + 1 = 2. We can call that like standard math, and then we can construct another math where 1 + 1 = 7 or something. The 1 + 1 = 7 math is false because it doesn't correspond to reality. The 1 + 1 = 2 math is true because it corresponds to reality. So we're not, the mathematical facts don't exist. Math is just a language, but some of the languages correspond to reality and some of them don't. So that's the part what makes 1 + 1 = 2 objective, is because that corresponds to reality. Even if the language is subjective and we could change it to 1 + 1 = 7, the fact that 1 + 1 = 2 is just a fact about reality, and we're just using math to describe that fact.
But I think it is. I think he was getting at like even the fact that we have to illustrate the fact that we are arguing mathematical problems in a mathematical context is kind of like not objective.
Well, again, so it's
and
the same answer, is that math is objective because it corresponds to reality. And if you use a different math
in
that
what
doesn't
way?
correspond to reality, then it's not objective. Math is just a language. So if I say I am currently holding a coffee mug, that's objectively true because it corresponds to reality. The language, we can just change the language and say I am not holding a coffee mug, but that statement is false because it doesn't correspond to reality. So again, mathematical statements and mathematical facts on their own don't exist. Math is just a language. But some expressions of math do correspond to reality, and that correspondence to reality makes them objectively true.
Mm.
All right, but I gotta go. I'm running late to my
I'm
appointment,
sorry.
so I'll
It's
talk to
too
you guys
hard
later.
for me to wrap my head around this, but
Yeah, we'll talk about it next time. I should be on pretty soon.
maybe I'll
All right,
hop
see ya.
on.